Chapter 975. She glanced at the location where the images had appeared. It was pitch black, as if nothing had happened. Other than her. No one knew what kind of shocking secret had appeared here. Chu Luyue took a deep breath and cleared her mind of all distracting thoughts. There's no point in staying here. If I want to know everything, the best way is to ask Rongxiu personally. Swoosh. Chu Luyue summoned the Dragon Abyss sword and gripped the hilt tightly. At the same time, she activated the force in her body. However, when she did this, she realized that the force in her body was dissipating worse than she had expected. The yuan meridians in her body were like rivers. Under normal circumstances, these rivers would be abundant. However, at this moment, most of them had dried up. Chu Luyue was a little frightened. If not for Taizu, she would have been in real danger. Something is indeed wrong here. As Chu Luyue spoke, she suddenly froze. She seemed to understand why Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou had been sitting in their original spots and doing nothing, but had sent out distress signals. She had not had time to go to Jian Fengqi, but Chang Wanzhou's side did not have many external injuries. However, their internal injuries were extremely serious, and the force in their bodies had been greatly depleted. Perhaps, they had encountered the same situation as her. This strange space had used some kind of method to replay the memories of the people trapped here. It had also quietly lured them into a coma, and used this opportunity to devour their force. Taizu, do you know how long we have been here? Chu Luyue asked. I'm not too sure. The spatial energy here is different from the outside world, and the flow rate is also different. Therefore, it's hard to determine how long has passed outside. Taizu sighed awkwardly. Chu Luyue nodded. Actually, this was within her expectations. Now, she could only hope that Mu Hongyu and the others were still doing well, and she had to leave this place first. The water droplet in her dantian slowly rotated, and streams of force surged out, quickly flowing towards Chu Luyue's limbs and bones. Very soon, the missing energy in her body was completely replenished, and she was full again. If it was anyone else, they would basically be in the same situation as Chang Wanzhou. However, Chu Luyue was different. The water droplet in her body had devoured too much force. With her current level, it was basically an inexhaustible supply. Qi. Two streams of flames surged out of the Dragon Abyss sword. One red and one transparent. This light quickly lit up the surroundings. The invisible force seemed to have sensed the threat, and began to rapidly close in. Chu Luyue's body could clearly feel the pressure coming from all directions. His chest felt heavy, and he almost couldn't breathe. Even the flow of origin power in his body had slowed down. She clenched her teeth and poured her vigorous force into the Dragon Abyss sword. Then, he gripped the hilt of the sword with both hands and raised it high. It hacked down fiercely. Chang Wanzhou had intended to return with Chu Luyue. However, as soon as she turned around, her figure disappeared. The surroundings were empty. There was nothing. Chang Wanzhou frowned. He knew that he had fallen into the same predicament as before. The day before, when he and Jian Fengqi came here, they had also encountered the same situation. Then, the two of them separated and lost contact with each other. After that, he fell into a coma. He knew that his situation was very dangerous. Relying on his last bit of rationality, he crushed the Jin Lingzi and blew the whistle. Fortunately, she had really come. However, not long after, the same thing happened again. Soon, Chang Wanzhou was shrouded in darkness again. Young Lord, Jian Fengqi, wake up. An anxious and worried voice entered his ears. Jian Fengqi gradually regained consciousness. Then he opened his eyes with great difficulty. Don't shout. Cough, cough, cough. I can hear you. Jian Fengqi opened his mouth. Only then did he realize that his voice was very weak and a little hoarse. Thinking of the previous incident, his eyes darkened. Then, he turned his gaze and saw Mu Hongyu in front of him. Young lord, you're finally awake. Mu Hongyu's nervous and worried expression disappeared. She heaved a sigh of relief and patted her chest. Seeing her like this, Jian Fengqi felt as if his heart was gently poked by something. His gloomy mood instantly dissipated. Instead, there was an indescribable feeling surging in his chest. What are you nervous about? I'm very lucky. He coughed again. However, he had recovered some of his strength. Mu Hongyu nodded seriously. That's good, that's good. If you didn't wake up, I was going to try and see if I could wake you up. She had already moved her wrist. The corner of Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched. No need. There's really no need. It wasn't that he didn't know Mu Hongyu's strength. If he slapped her. Jian Fengqi was suddenly very glad that he woke up in time. Otherwise this face, suddenly he paused. His eyebrows furrowed as he looked at Mu Hongyu. Wait, why are you here? He remembered that he and Chang Wanzhou had separated not long after entering this canyon. After that, he realized that something was very wrong here. He directly crushed Jean Lingzi. He wanted to get out as soon as possible. However, he didn't know why. But he fainted until Mu Hongyu arrived. We're here to save you, of course. You? Jian Fengqi looked around. They were still in the canyon. However, other than the two of them, there was no one else. Who else? Lu Yu. Mu Hongyu said inside. It's a pity that we're trapped here now. We don't know what's going on outside, and we don't know if they're safe now. Jian Fengqi almost suspected that he had heard wrong. He couldn't help but ask. Who did you say? Mu Hongyu saw his puzzled face, and simply explained the cause and effect of the matter. After listening, Jian Fengqi's expression was dull for a long time. Chu Luyue forcefully split open the barrier of ancient Phoenix Mountain, and came in. After saving Mu Hongyu and the others, he came here. And even summoned a second mythological beast to fly down and save them. How long had it been? How could so many things happen? Mu Hongyu didn't really care about his reaction, and she only said, Young master, we have to get out of here quickly. Otherwise, with your current situation, it will only be worse if you continue to stay here. Jian Fengqi nodded. Of course, he was very clear about this. However, how do we get out? The spatial turbulence here was very chaotic and terrifying. Every time he thought he was going to get out, he would be beaten back. Mu Hongyu patted her chest, her almond-shaped eyes curved. Have you forgotten that I have a faint yuan body? Leave it to me. With that, she stood up and stretched out her hand to Jian Fengqi to help him up. Then she said, Hold me tight. Jian Fengqi's heart suddenly jumped. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 976. Mu Hongyu waited for a while, and realized that Jian Fengqi did not move. She looked up at him strangely. What's wrong? The girl in front of him had bright almond-shaped eyes, and a pretty face. She was standing in front of him, so close that he could see her long eyelashes. Jian Fengqi exchanged glances with her, and his heart beat faster for some reason. He almost looked away awkwardly. Hugging doesn't seem to be appropriate. If these words were heard by outsiders, they would probably laugh their heads off on the spot. Jian Fengqi, who had always been a playboy, actually said something like inappropriate to a girl. It was simply touching. However, although Mu Hongyu had heard some rumors about Jian Fengqi, she was not a native of West Hill. Moreover, she had spent most of her short months in West Hill on Dragon Teeth Mountain. What kind of place was Dragon Teeth Mountain? It was Jian Fengqi's home. Who dared to say anything bad about the young master? Therefore, she did not know much about Jian Fengqi. Mu Hongyu blinked. What's inappropriate about it? You even saved me before. Shouldn't I find a way to get you out of here? We are all friends, so of course we should help each other. Thinking about how Lu Yu was willing to risk his life for them, this was nothing. Thinking of this, she took a step forward. The distance between the two of them instantly shortened. The heat and fragrance from her body assailed his nostrils, and filled his body in an instant. Jian Fengqi opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. His whole body stiffened. Mu Hongyu did not notice his abnormality. She grabbed his hand, and placed it on her waist. The girl's slender and soft waist seemed to be on fire. The moment he touched her, his palm felt hot. A wave of heat surged up, and Jian Fengqi's jade-like face instantly turned crimson. Even his ears felt like they were on fire. With a red face, he almost instinctively hugged her waist tightly. But he did not dare to get too close. He was afraid that he would burn himself. Hold on tight. Mu Hongyu shouted softly and closed her eyes. The next moment, the power of the space around her suddenly started to surge outwards. Jian Fengqi could clearly feel that the forces that had been suppressing them earlier were rapidly moving away. Then, with a flash of black light, they disappeared on the spot. Boom! The long yuan sword slashed down fiercely and landed on the black barrier. There was a loud boom. The two forces madly collided, producing terrifying and crazy energy waves. The surrounding invisible forces started to churn wildly. Like sharp knives, they were cutting everywhere. Chi! One of them went straight for Chu Liyue's neck. At this point, a bright light appeared from Chu Liyue's body. The pure gold armor appeared once again. Ding! Ding 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 ding! Crisp sounds from all parts of his body. Fortunately, these attacks were nothing compared to the defense of the pure gold armor. The only pity was that when the long yuan sword landed, although the black barrier was impacted, it did not seem to have any intention of breaking. At this moment, Taizu's voice could be heard. This barrier is protected by divine power. Based on your current strength, it will be difficult to break it open. Let me give you a hand. With that, Chu Liyue felt the aura of the long yuan sword suddenly surging. A vast and mighty pressure descended. Several silver lightning bolts swam wildly on the long yuan sword, and finally gathered at the tip of the sword. Break! The great ancestor bellowed. That ball of silver Tianlei power suddenly exploded. Bang! The terrifying force spread in all directions. Chu Liyue's sword-wielding arm trembled violently. The web between her thumb and index finger was torn. Blood flowed out. Just as her arm was completely numb, the darkness in front of her finally broke. Crack! A bright ray of light shone into the room. A powerful force came from behind and pushed Chu Liyue forward. Chu Liyue only felt that the light in front of her was dazzling. Then her body suddenly fell. Thousands of miles away, Rongxiu had been busy dealing with the matters of several tribes recently. He had not slept for a few days and nights. Today, he finally had some time to lie down and rest. But not long after, he frowned in his sleep. Then he suddenly opened his eyes. He sat up, one hand on the edge of the bed, and the other hand gently rubbed between his eyebrows. His white inner shirt was loose, revealing his collarbone and a small part of his chest. The moonlight shone through the window and shone on his body. Every inch of skin that was unintentionally exposed was like white jade. The moonlight was like water, making his face look even more noble. He was like a flower on a snowy mountain, unreachable, cold and calm. After a moment of silence, he lifted the blanket, grabbed the clothes beside him, and draped them over his body. Yan Qing, who was guarding outside the door, seemed to have heard the commotion in the hall. "Your Highness, you're awake? Come in." Hearing this, Yan Qing quickly pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he entered the room, Yan Qing saw that his master not only got up, but also changed his clothes. Moreover, his face seemed to be a little strange. Yan Qing was shocked. He quickly stepped forward and asked carefully, "Your Highness, what's wrong with you?" Rongxiu's gaze was calm, but it was frighteningly deep. "Go and get the Pantheon record." A trace of surprise flashed in Yan Qing's eyes, but he still immediately said, "Yes, I'll go and get it now. But there are a total of 10 volumes of the Pantheon record. Which volume do you want to read?" Rongxiu thought for a moment and said lightly, "The 10th volume." Yan Qing was stunned for a moment and asked, "You mean, the volume of the 3,000 years of the Exime Yuan calendar? Didn't your Highness read that volume before?" Rongxiu nodded gently and immediately said, "And the 9th volume." If he guessed correctly, the name of the person in the North Sea seemed to be recorded in the 9th volume. Digression 6 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 977. Yan Qing didn't know why His Highness suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and wanted to read the Pantheon record. After all, the number of times His Highness had opened it for so many years could be counted on one hand. And every time, it was a time when something important was about to happen. Could it be that something had happened? The 10th volume. The only thing Yan Qing could think of was that it had something to do with that person. As for the 9th volume, he couldn't think of a reason at all. But of course, he didn't dare to ask these questions. After responding, he bowed and left. After Yanqing left, the hall fell into silence again. Rongxiu gently closed his eyes. The moonlight that was as cool as water enveloped his entire body. Under his long eyelashes, a faint shadow was cast. At this time, she should be at the ancient Phoenix Mountain. He wasn't worried about how dangerous it would be. After all, with her strength and trump cards, she should be able to deal with it. But after all, it was a special place. He didn't know if that person in the northern underworld had left something behind when he broke through at the ancient Phoenix Mountain. What if, after a moment, Rongxiu opened his eyes? The Black Pyramid was as calm as usual, as if there were no waves. This made him feel a little relieved. But for some reason, he felt inexplicably uneasy. It was as if something had gone out of control. If it was something else, it would be fine. But he always felt that it seemed to be related to her. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door, and Rongxiu raised his eyes slightly. The door opened, and Yanqing returned. But this time, he was holding a bronze plate in his hand. On the plate, there were 2 rolls of bamboo slips, emitting a faint glow around them. And these were the 9th and 10th volumes of the Pantheon record. Your Highness. Yanqing respectfully handed over the 2 rolls. Rongxiu raised his white fingers, and the 2 rolls of bamboo slips silently flew in front of him, floating quietly in the air. He took one of the bamboo slips. Every bamboo slip on it was engraved with neat golden handwriting. However, the last one was completely blank. No, to be precise, there was actually handwriting on it. But for some reason, the handwriting was so worn that it was almost impossible to read. It was as if someone had forcefully erased it. Now only fragmented traces of stars were left, flickering with a faint golden light. It was like a few stars that occasionally appeared in the dark night. Rongxiu stared at the few golden light spots, his eyes deepened and sighed softly. Sure. She had actually reached this step. It was much faster than he had expected. But then again, she was no ordinary person to begin with. Even if she were to start all over again, she would still be far superior to ordinary people in all aspects. But Rongxiu leaned against the chair and rubbed his temples with a slight headache. Yanqing asked worriedly, Your Highness, are you okay? Rongxiu shook his head, took one last look, and closed the 10th scroll. Of Stuzes. To be. It was just that there was a small problem. Rongxiu said. His thin scarlet lips were slightly raised. His tone was helpless, with a trace of imperceptible doting. The next time we meet, I'm afraid it won't be so easy. Prepare 2 more quilts for I. Yanqing was confused. Quilt? You're using the new one. His Highness is noble. His food, clothing, and other necessities are all the best. Why does he suddenly want a quilt? It's not for now. Rongxiu waved his hand and coughed. It's better to be prepared. Yanqing was a little confused. His Highness meant to keep it for future use? But no matter where he went, His Highness would definitely choose a comfortable place to sleep. If he was not satisfied, he would not sleep at all. He had never needed to prepare a quilt for himself. Yes, I will do it as soon as possible. Yanqing was confused, but his intuition, which had been trained by his master's side for many years, told him not to ask. It would not end well if he asked. Then, Rongxiu opened the remaining scroll. After reading for a while, he saw a few familiar words. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and a cluster of golden flames suddenly burned on his fingertips. Yanqing was shocked. Your Highness! What was His Highness planning to do? It should be known that the Pantheon record could not be destroyed. Rongxiu moved his fingertips, and a small golden spark fell on one of the bamboo slips. Like a drop of water falling into the sea, it did not cause the slightest ripple. However, such a simple action consumed a lot of Rongxiu's energy. When his finger fell, fine beads of sweat had already appeared on his forehead, and his lips were faintly pale. Yanqing knelt on one knee. Although he did not see it clearly, he could roughly guess what he was doing. He could not help but be very worried. But His Highness insisted, and he knew that it was useless to persuade him. He could only frown and sigh secretly. After doing all this, Rongxiu closed the scroll and put it back on the bronze plate. Send it back. Yes. After Yanqing left, only Rongxiu was left in the hall. He sat quietly for a while before standing up. But at this time, He was not sleepy at all. After taking 2 steps, a huge white figure suddenly appeared. It was Shue Shue. It seemed to have felt something, and a trace of awe flashed in its eyes. Then it walked to Rong Xiu, prostrated on the ground, and wagged its tail, very obediently acting coquettishly. Rong Xiu touched its head. It's been some time since you came back from the Red Moon Desert, right? Shue Shue's body suddenly stiffened. A rare trace of gentleness appeared on Rong Xiu's face. The seniors must miss you very much. How about we go again? Ancient Phoenix Mountain. Outside the barrier. Time passed day by day, and in the blink of an eye, everyone had been in there for 14 days. There was only 1 day left until the last day of 3 elements as one. Everyone was on high alert. The closer they got to the node, the more nervous they became. The many powerhouses who were responsible for guarding the entrance and exit outside the barrier could clearly feel the surge of energy in Ancient Phoenix Mountain, which caused an obvious change in the power of the barrier. Because of this, they became more and more focused, afraid that the slightest mistake would occur. The emperors of the 4 empires were all waiting at this time. However, the expressions of these people were greatly different. Jun Qiji's expression was calm, but there was a faint trace of anticipation in his eyes. Ning Yuan was as still as a mountain. Gong Sun Xiao was a little nervous and anxious, and would look at the barrier from time to time. As for Tan Taichen, he sat in his seat, and his face was extremely gloomy. His eyes were bloodshot, and his whole body was surrounded by a gloomy atmosphere. He had been staring at the colorful barrier, and there was deep hatred between his brows. Since a few days ago, he had suddenly become like this. In fact, everyone could roughly guess that something had happened to the people of Taiyu dynasty inside for him to be like this. However, the time was not up, and the barrier was not open, so everyone could only wait. At this moment the sky suddenly darkened. Dark clouds gathered, and the wind howled. Gong Sun Xiao could not help but point to the main peak of Ancient Phoenix Mountain. 3 elements as one is about to descend. Digression question. What did Rong Xiu want for the 2 quilts? The correct answer in the comment section will be rewarded with Xiaoxiang coins. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 978. Even though the colorful barrier covered the entire mountain range, everyone could still see the outlines of the mountains from the outside. For example, at this moment, when everyone looked up, they could see that the dark clouds in the sky were all converging towards the highest peak. Something big must have happened, if there was a natural phenomenon. If it wasn't 3 essences as one, what could it be? Tan Taichen also raised his eyes and looked over suddenly. He slowly clenched his fists, the veins on his forehead bulging, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Finally, it was at this moment, when this matter was over, and those people came out of the barrier, he would definitely look for Shangguan Yu, and take back everything. At the same time, everyone in the barrier also noticed the commotion. In fact, most of them had already reached the bottom of the main peak. If they wanted to receive the endless force of 3 essences as one, they had to climb to the top of the main peak, and stand at the highest point. Therefore, almost everyone had been heading this way for the past few days. Seeing the natural phenomenon, everyone couldn't suppress the excitement in their hearts, and started to climb up. The commotion naturally attracted the attention of Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming, who were waiting at the top of the canyon. It's almost the last day, and 3 essences as one is about to appear. Yuan Jinghong looked at the commotion at the top of the main peak in the distance, and muttered in a low voice. He then looked down at the canyon below. But they haven't come out yet. What should we do? Wu Ming also had a worried look on his face. Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu had gone down together, saying that they wanted to bring Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou back. However, after the 2 of them went down, they sat cross-legged and didn't move at all. It had been a few days, but they still didn't show any signs of coming up. This was something that could not help but make people worried. If it weren't for the fact that the legendary 3-eyed eagle was still below, they would have already rushed over. I don't know what's wrong with this canyon. Why did they stop moving after going down? Yuan Jinghong frowned. He really couldn't figure it out. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and stood up suddenly. I can't wait any longer. It was fine if they couldn't make it in time for 3 essences as one. But what if they didn't come up when they were close to leaving? One had to know that the time left for them to get out was extremely short. If he was careless and delayed, wouldn't he be trapped here forever? When Wu Ming heard this, his expression turned solemn. He felt that what he said made a lot of sense. Although the two of them knew that Chu Luiyue had broken through the barrier to enter, they had always thought that she had done it with the help of many experts outside. How could he not panic at this moment? I didn't go down before, because I was worried that I would become a burden to Her Majesty and the others. But now, I can't care about that anymore. Yuan Jinghong said and patted Wu Ming on the shoulder. Your injuries haven't healed yet, so wait here first. I'll take the lead and go down to take a look. As he spoke, he didn't wait for Wu Ming to refuse. He quickly ran forward and leaped. Wait! Wu Ming was shocked. He was about to stop him, but he failed to do so. However, at this moment, a red flame flew out from the side and quickly blocked Yuan Jinghong's path. Yuan Jinghong turned to look at Dumpling in surprise. What are you? Before he could finish, Dumpling flapped her wings. Yuan Jinghong was instantly enveloped by a powerful force and flew back to his original spot. His eyes lit up, and he looked at Tuanzi blankly. Wu Ming thought for a moment. It doesn't seem to want us to go down. Dumpling glanced at the two of them. Why go down? It's already messy enough. All he had to do was to stay here and wait. As if understanding Dumpling's gaze, the two of them looked at each other, suppressed the uneasiness in their hearts, and continued to wait. No matter what, this red-tailed phoenix is Her Majesty's contracted magical beast. It should be able to sense something, right? I hope everything goes well for Her Majesty and the others. Wu Ming glanced at the main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain and said in a low voice. Waiting always seemed to be particularly unbearable. Seeing that the sky was gradually darkening, Chu Luiyue and the others still did not move. Wu Ming and Yuan Jinghong were anxious again. But seeing that Dumpling was still calm, they could only continue to wait. Yuan Jinghong glanced at the main peak from time to time. It was a little far from here, but he could still see the flat and smooth top of the mountain. Until now, no one had climbed up. However, it was obvious that those people must be climbing halfway up the mountain. It was just that because the forest was dense, they could not see clearly, and did not know the situation of the competition at this time. The sky was dark, and even the figures in the valley seemed to be gradually blurred. Soon it was midnight. A bright moon hung high in the night sky, scattering its clear light over the entire mountain range. The mountains rose and fell, and the forest was dark, reflecting dark blue shadows. It was exceptionally quiet. There were only the occasional rustling of the wind blowing through the forest and the canyon. At this moment, there was a sudden movement in the sky. Whirlwind. The pressure was impressive. Yuan Jinghong looked back and saw a tall and vigorous figure. With a leap, he directly climbed up the main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain. Under the moonlight, he waved his long sleeves, and his clothes fluttered. His movement technique was peerless. That's Jun Jiuqing. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes, stared for a while, and said with certainty. After Yuan Jinghong was shocked, he quickly accepted this matter. He shrugged. It's not normal if it's not him. This ancient Phoenix Mountain was the territory of the Baiming dynasty, and he was Prince Baiming. The blood of the royal family flowed in his body. Wasn't it natural for him to be first? Wu Ming nodded and said, although that's the case, it's still very enviable to be able to climb up the mountain. Even if you're not first and can't obtain the endless force of 3 elements as one, you can still bathe in divine power. This is undoubtedly a rare opportunity. Yuan Jinghong sighed. I don't have any thoughts about this now. I just hope that Her Majesty and the rest are fine, and can return safely. Bang! The sound of an explosion suddenly came from within the canyon. The two of them were shocked and looked down nervously. They saw 2 figures leaping up from below. Bang, bang, bang. A series of explosions sounded. The seemingly tranquil space, because of the impact, exploded continuously. The originally messy energy started to stir violently. It's Mu Hongyu and Feng Qi. Yuan Jinghong's sharp eyes recognized the two of them, and was surprised and delighted. Seeing the two of them coming up and getting closer to them, Dumpling suddenly flapped its wings and flew up. It went straight for the two of them. A crimson figure flashed by at lightning speed. Mu Hongyu and Jian Fengqi had already landed on Dumpling's back. The chaotic and terrifying energy was attacking crazily, wanting to drag Dumpling down as well. It waved its claws and flew up at the same time. Then it landed on the cliff. Yuan Jinghong and Jian Fengqi immediately went forward. But before they could rejoice, their expressions changed drastically. This was because Mu Hongyu and Jian Fengqi were both covered in blood. What happened to the two of you? Mu Hongyu opened her mouth, but spat out a mouthful of blood. Jian Fengqi's heart twitched violently as he instinctively hugged her tightly and quickly fed her a pill. He couldn't care about his own injuries and looked at the two of them. The space below is in chaos. Where's Sheng Guanyu? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 979. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming were stunned. Her Majesty is still in the canyon. She hasn't come up. Jian Fengqi followed the duo's gaze and vaguely saw two figures sitting cross-legged. He gritted his teeth. That's an illusion. What? Hearing this, the two of them were shocked. When they looked again, they saw the two figures exploding in the chaotic energy battle. It was indeed not them. How could this be? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming looked at each other. They had been guarding here for the past few days and saw them go down with their own eyes. Then, they sat down next to Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou. In this period of time, no one moved at all. Why did they suddenly become illusions? Jian Fengqi frowned. There are several spaces down there that can easily cause hallucinations. The two of them should still be trapped down there. Everything was fine at first. Mu Hongyu wanted to take him and escape from that space. However, due to the pressure from several forces around them, they couldn't get out directly. Instead, they rushed into another space. After struggling for a few times, they finally reached a less chaotic place above. They even saw Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming waiting above the canyon. They were only a few steps away from successfully rushing up. However, at this moment, several spaces down there suddenly exploded one after another for some reason. The violent energy almost swallowed the two of them. Mu Hongyu barely managed to escape with Jian Fengqi after risking her life. However, along the way, she suffered too many violent attacks from the space and was seriously injured. She had a faint yuan body and was naturally sensitive to space. She was already in such a state after escaping from that space. What about Chu Luiyue and Wu Ming? What should we do? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming also realized the seriousness of the matter at this time. Their hearts were in their mouths. Wait, where's the legendary three-eyed eagle? Wu Ming suddenly shouted. The few of them looked over, and sure enough, they discovered that there was nothing left in the canyon. That gigantic three-eyed eagle had also disappeared at this moment. At this time, the explosions below were much softer and soon disappeared completely. The canyon was a mess. Rocks were flying everywhere, and smoke and dust were everywhere. However, there was no one. Look, what's that? Yuan Jinghong suddenly exclaimed. Above the empty ground, a silver energy vortex suddenly appeared. The silver vortex continued to expand, and the speed at which it spun became faster and faster. Just as their faces were filled with doubt and nervousness, a figure suddenly flew out from the vortex. It's Chang Wanzhou. Wu Ming saw that person's face. Due to the impact of the whirlpool's power, Chang Wanzhou flew straight towards a cliff after flying out. With such a strong impact, if not death, it would be fatal. At this moment, a red figure quickly flew out. It was Dumpling. It spread its wings and flew across the sky at lightning speed. The next moment, it appeared right in front of Chang Wanzhou and intercepted it. Before they could see what happened, they saw Dumpling flying back with Chang Wanzhou. Then, it flapped its wings and carefully put Chang Wanzhou down. Yuan Jinghong immediately went forward. Chang Wanzhou's eyes were tightly shut, and his body was covered in blood. Fortunately, he was still breathing. He seems to have fainted. Yuan Jinghong turned around and looked at Jian Fengqi. Mu Hongyu tugged at Jian Fengqi's sleeve indicating for him to put her down and check on Chang Wanzhou. Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment, then placed Mu Hongyu next to Dumpling. At the same time he whispered to her, "Your injuries are more serious. Your external injuries are more serious. Don't move around, okay?" Mu Hongyu nodded seriously, then smiled and waved her fist. "Don't worry. I've suffered even more serious injuries before. Aren't I fine now?" Last time, when she was on the brink of death, she inexplicably became a faint Yuan body. Jian Fengqi's face, which always had a flirtatious smile, was cold at this moment, and he just stared at her quietly. When he was not smiling, he always looked particularly solemn, and there was a trace of coercion that made people not dare to disobey him. Mu Hongyu suddenly felt very embarrassed and inexplicably guilty. She slowly withdrew her fist. "Okay," she murmured. Jian Fengqi's expression eased a little. Looking at her embarrassed face, he wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with his sleeve. Halfway through, he met Mu Hongyu's confused and strange gaze. Only then did he realize what he was doing and suddenly froze. Then he pretended as if nothing had happened and withdrew his hand. However, Mu Hongyu kept looking at him. Her almond-shaped eyes were so clean and pure that for the first time, Jian Fengqi felt ashamed. He looked away and frowned, as if he was a little disgusted. "Your face is covered in blood, so ugly." After saying that, he hurriedly turned around and walked towards Chang Wanzhou. Mu Hongyu touched her face. She was not angry at Jian Fengqi's words. Instead, she felt a little strange. Or rather, he was a little strange. She did not know if it was an illusion. But why did she feel that Jian Fengqi always felt a little guilty when he faced her? Jian Fengqi did not dare to turn around to look at Mu Hongyu. He walked over and took Chang Wanzhou's pulse. He frowned. "How's the situation?" Yuan Jinghong asked carefully. "The force in his body has been exhausted, and his internal injuries are very serious." As soon as he said that, everyone present started to worry. Then they heard Jian Fengqi continue. "However, his body is very special, as if there's a force gradually surging out." Jian Fengqi did not elaborate. He could feel that there was a shocking chill in Chang Wanzhou's body. This chill seemed to have frozen most of the power in his body. Jian Fengqi could vaguely sense that the power in his body was suppressed by a seal. At this moment his internal injuries had also shaken this part. If he guessed correctly, this would increase the power in Chang Wanzhou's body rapidly. Jian Fengqi took out 2 pills and gave them to him. These 2 pills can temporarily stabilize his internal situation. As for the rest, we'll see. Wu Ming asked. "So he's not in much danger for the time being?" Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment and nodded. As long as the seal in his body was not completely removed, he should be safe. Hearing his words, the people around him relaxed a little. Chang Wanzhou is out, but where's His Majesty? Yuan Jinghong looked down and saw that the vortex was gradually dissipating. Soon, everything below calmed down, and Chu Luyue was nowhere to be seen. Screech. At this moment, Dumpling let out a clear cry, bent down, and lowered its wings. Wu Ming was stunned for a moment and asked uncertainly, "Is it telling us to go up?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 980. That arrow was a dazzling color, and it was extremely beautiful. Even in this dazzling golden sky, it was still very eye-catching. It appeared very suddenly, and its target was very clear, Chu Luyue. Everywhere it passed, the golden force retreated, the space shattered, and the wind howled. The arrow seemed to have entered an unstoppable realm amidst the astonishingly vast sea of golden origin power. It was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it was already above Chu Luyue's head. It was about to pierce through her skull. Seeing this arrow, Jun Jiuqing immediately frowned. That was clearly formed by the divine power left behind by Taizu. Why did it suddenly appear now and go straight for her? And it was obvious that it wanted to take her life. At this moment, Chu Luyue looked up. The power of that arrow was extremely strong, and before it reached her, she already felt a faint stinging pain between her eyebrows. It wasn't hard to imagine that if this arrow really pierced her, her life would most likely end here. Unfortunately, she was not so easy to bully. Buzz! With a thought, the long yuan sword flew up instantly. It went head-on against that arrow. Slash! An ear-piercing scraping sound was heard, and that arrow quickly scraped past the long yuan sword, causing a string of sparks. After all, the long yuan sword was a divine weapon, and it still slowed down its speed. However, this arrow contained the remnant consciousness of that person. It was extremely cunning. Seeing that it was more troublesome to go head-on against the long yuan sword, it immediately changed its direction and planned to come from another direction. The long yuan sword chased after it. After all, Taizu's soul was also stored in the long yuan sword, and Chu Liyue could not split herself, so Taizu controlled the long yuan sword to stop it. The two of them were entangled. They were entangled in a fight. The intense fight caused the golden force around Chu Liyue to decrease, and the whole place was in chaos. Soon Chu Liyue discovered something strange. Although the arrow had been trying to attack her from all directions, it had never tried to attack from the side of the black shield. It seemed to be deliberately avoiding it. Not sure if it was an illusion, but Chu Liyue faintly felt that it seemed to have a trace of reverence towards this black shield. However, the black shield could not completely protect her. After all, she still had to divert a part of her attention to devouring the surrounding force. This could not go on. When all the golden force surged towards Jun Jiuqing, there would be no turning back. A thought flashed across Chu Liyue's mind, and she seemed to have thought of something as determination flashed across her eyes. Taizu, please help me hold on for a while more, she said in her heart. The great ancestor felt a little uneasy. Girl, what are you trying to do? Chu Liyue sighed. Now that she was at the mercy of others, what else could she do? Naturally, it was to flip the chopping board. At this time, the other people who were watching nervously also noticed that arrow. That arrow was extremely powerful, so it was not difficult for them to guess that it was the divine power left behind by Taizu of the Dark North Kingdom. Qing Dai let out a long sigh of relief. It seems that even Taizu does not like her. An outsider from the Tianling dynasty dared to try and steal the power left behind by Taizu of the Dark North Kingdom? Wasn't she looking for trouble? Previously, she was worried that the crown prince would be merciful to her. But now that Taizu's divine power had personally appeared, there was nothing to worry about. Young Master Jian, half of Chang Wanzhou's body is covered in ice. What should we do? In such an urgent situation, Wu Ming was originally worried about Chu Liyue. But when he glanced at Chang Wanzhou from the corner of his eyes, it seemed that the situation had become worse, and he could not help but ask. Jian Fengqi glanced sideways, frowned and shook his head. The seal and the suppressed power in his body are extremely powerful, and I can't do anything about it. Now it's up to him to see if he can make it through. Wu Ming wanted to say something, but he hesitated. He knew that Jian Fengqi was telling the truth, so he glanced at Chang Wanzhou, and could only sigh helplessly. Almost all of the power is rushing toward Jun Jiuqing. Mu Hongyu nervously clutched her sleeves. When all of the power was sucked away from Chu Liyue, then she would be completely eliminated. It seems that Shang Guanyu must have done something outrageous in the ancient Phoenix Mountain to cause such a disaster. Outside the barrier, everyone was closely watching everything that was happening on the main peak. Tan Taichen said in a gloomy voice. He deliberately glanced at Jun Qiji, hinting at something. Otherwise, why would he attract the attack of the Dark North Taizu's divine power? Jun Qiji frowned slightly, and did not say anything. Not long after Tan Taichen entered Shang Guanyu, he seemed to have changed into a different person. He kept talking about things related to Shang Guanyu. It was easy to guess that something had happened to the people from the Taiyu dynasty, and he was certain that Shang Guanyu and the others were behind it. Even the words that he was saying now did not conceal his disgust and hostility towards Shang Guanyu. If it were any other time, Jun Qiji would not have cared too much. However, after seeing that arrow, he could not help but think more about it. However, the truth was not clear yet, so he could not make any conclusions. He only said, "It's human nature to want to become stronger. However, it seems that we still have to know our limits." Before he could finish, his expression changed drastically, and he stood up abruptly. At the top of the main peak, The golden origin power that had been snatched away earlier suddenly rushed toward Chu Luyue. Even the origin power that originally belonged to Jun Jiuqing changed direction and rushed into Chu Luyue's body. In the sky, thick layers of dark clouds suddenly surged. She's going to break through at this time? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 981. Everyone was dead silent. Wu Ming coughed and winked at him. Let's find a place to heal first. Only then did Yuan Jinghong notice the complicated gazes around him. He felt a chill down his spine and quickly nodded. Okay. The mountaintop was smooth and clean, and it was very spacious. There was still room for the few of them. However, as they moved, they still attracted a lot of attention. The surroundings became quieter, and only the sound of their footsteps was particularly clear. This was a little awkward. Mu Hongyu couldn't help but whisper to Jian Fengqi, who was next to her. Why do they keep looking at us? Jian Fengqi helped her apply medicine on her arm, and said indifferently without raising his head. Anyone who takes a shortcut during a competition will be looked at like this. Moreover, they weren't just taking a shortcut, they were directly at the end. It was obvious that these people had gone through a lot of hardships to reach the main peak. How could they not be angry when they saw them arrive so easily? Mu Hongyu nodded in understanding and obediently shut her mouth. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming carried Chang Wanzhou over. Dumpling followed closely behind. The five of them gathered together, and the Tianling dynasty instantly became the family with the most people on this mountain peak. Gong Sun Yu's face was a little ugly. He had just finished speaking, and these people came in the blink of an eye. Moreover, all five of them had come. Even the Baiming dynasty couldn't do this. They just relied on a divine beast and did it so easily. It was simply infuriating to compare oneself to others. Hey! He couldn't help but yell at them angrily. Everyone came here based on their own abilities. Don't you think it's too much to be so opportunistic? Jian Fengqi couldn't be bothered to respond. He was still carefully treating Mu Hongyu's wound. Yuan Jinghong couldn't bear to listen to such words. He crossed his arms and chuckled. Opportunistic? This divine beast is ours, so why can't we use it? Besides, they didn't seem to have said anything about it, right? If you're not convinced, why don't you summon your own mythological beast? Gong Sun Yu choked. A young man behind him retorted. But isn't this mythical beast from Shengguan Yu? What does it have to do with you? Relying on a divine beast that was secretly brought in to ascend the main peak. Heh. His words were filled with undisguised disdain. Yuan Jinghong said coldly, we didn't sneak this mythological beast in. It originally belonged to His Majesty. Also watch your words. How can you call the name of Tianling Emperor Yuanxi directly? Hearing that Yuan Jinghong had used her status to suppress him, the man was a little timid, but he quickly suppressed it. Since you admit that it's hers, then how did it appear here if you didn't secretly bring it in? Because His Majesty is here as well. Yuan Jinghong chuckled. Everyone was stunned. Impossible. 5 of you have already come in. How can she be here? Gong Sun Yu said with a frown. His Majesty has already come in a few days ago. It's been 9 days. Why don't you know anything about it? Yuan Jinghong glanced at him. If you don't believe me, you can ask these people from the Baiming dynasty. At that time, they all saw it clearly. Hearing his confident tone, Gong Sun Yu and the others suddenly felt a little guilty. They quickly looked at Jun Jiuqing. Jun Jiuqing said lazily, I thought that she would arrive earlier, but now, it seems that I overestimated her. He admitted it. Gong Sun Yu and the others felt even more embarrassed, but at the same time, more questions arose in their minds. How can Shengguan Yu enter in the middle of the time? How did she do it? It seems that she's the only one who came in. Why didn't the others stop her or send people in together? There were too many questions, but there was no point in asking them now. They're already at the top of the mountain. Are we going to chase them down? Even though these people were more or less injured, the red-tailed phoenix next to them was not to be trifled with. When the 2 men standing behind him saw this, they quickly went up to him and tried to appease him. Young prince, there's nothing for us to worry about. Even if they're here, they're all defeated now. They're not worth mentioning at all. That's right. Other than them, who didn't rely on their own abilities to come up here. When 3 essences as one above descends, they'll be in a sorry state. Gong Sun Yu was already unhappy, so he felt a little better after hearing those words. That's true. It's better to focus on 3 essences as one above first. As for the rest, we'll have to rely on our own strength. The people from the Tianling dynasty did not take this small argument to heart. This was because, while they were busy recuperating, they were also anxiously waiting for Chu Liyue's arrival. Since the red-tailed phoenix had sent them here, then she should be here too, right? Looking at the sky, the colorful light gradually revealed its outline. The few of them understood that they didn't have much time left. However, looking around, there was still no sign of Chu Liyue. Time passed slowly. Mu Hongyu's injuries had basically been treated. Although she was seriously injured earlier, fortunately, Jian Fengqi was there to treat her in time. In addition, her own recovery ability was also very strong, so she quickly got out of danger and stabilized her injuries. Jian Fengqi, on the other hand, had the help of Mu Hongyu, so when he escaped from that terrifying space, his injuries were not as serious as Mu Hongyu's. He was almost fully recovered after a little rest. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming had also mostly recovered in the past few days. Therefore, at this time, overall among them, Chang Wanzhou's situation was the worst. He leaned against a rock, his head tilted, and his breath was weak. His soft golden hair almost covered his eyebrows. No one saw that a faintly discernible light was emerging between his eyebrows. At this time, there were 2 forces in his body that were crazily intertwining. On one side was the seal, and on the other side was the frozenine energy. The last time in the Dahuang swamp, the seal had shown signs of loosening. Now that it had been hit by this violent force, it was severely damaged. Moreover, under the stimulation of the power of this space, the frozen power in his body seemed to want to break free from the shackles and completely rush out. Intense pain filled his body. Chang Wanzhou curled up and frowned in pain. The light between his eyebrows was even more obvious. Wu Ming noticed his abnormality and was about to go closer to take a look when a loud sound suddenly came from the sky. A bolt of lightning fell from the sky and struck the colorful ball of light. Boom! Boom! Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 982. At this moment, a ray of white light appeared on the horizon. The last day had arrived, and this Tianlei was the beginning of the descent of the 3 essences as one. When the Tianlei fell and struck the colorful ball of light, the vigorous force between heaven and earth began to surge out from the colorful ball of light. Whoosh! A red circle of light quickly spread out in all directions. In a split second, half of the sky was lit up. It was like a wave crashing onto the reef. It was also like a tidal wave that swept everything away. A vigorous and terrifying power surged forth. It's here! It was unknown who shouted this out. Everyone looked up and was on full alert. Boundless red origin power descended from the sky. The shocking pressure quickly pressed down. Pfft! This terrifying power had not completely descended, but it had already caused a great deterrence to everyone. A man standing behind Gong Sun Yu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. He looked up, his face full of panic. It was said that the power of the 3 essences, as one, would descend in a few rounds. Only those who could completely withstand it could obtain the endless force. There was even the divine power left behind by Taizu of the northern underworld. He never dared to hope that he could be that person. But he also never thought that he could not even make it through the first round. At this moment, he was not the only one who was suffering. The vigorous red force spread out, and the entire sky seemed to have turned into a red sea. The dark clouds were suffused with red light, and the mountains and forests were howling above the rolling mountains. Streams of ferocious origin power swept over from all directions and surged into his body. Moreover, they were flowing wildly. The intense pain was almost unbearable. The man who spat out blood first could not take it anymore. His knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. Bang! The sound of kneecaps knocking on the mountain rocks was almost negligible in this earth-shattering commotion. Even Gongsun Xiao had put away all his thoughts at this moment, and was doing his best to deal with everything in front of him. It was already very difficult to protect oneself, so who would care about others? The red force rolled down, and in an instant, more than half of the forest on the main peak was destroyed. Everywhere it passed, the trees were broken, and the mountain rocks collapsed. Ah! A cry of pain came from halfway up the mountain, reverberating through the undulating mountain range. It wasn't hard to tell from this voice that its owner was experiencing pain and suffering. Between heaven and earth there was chaos. And this was just the beginning. When almost the entire sky was drowned by the red origin power, a black figure quickly flew over from afar. It was the legendary three-eyed eagle. A woman was standing on its back. She was dressed in a red dress, her clothes fluttering in the wind, and her black hair fluttering in the wind. There were messy bloodstains on her face and body, but she didn't look like she was in a sorry state. Instead, she had a kind of intense fighting spirit that made people tremble in fear. Her eyes were fixed on the main peak not far away. The world was dark, and only the colorful ball of light was the most eye-catching existence. From here, one could clearly see that the entire void was filled with energy fluctuations. Without a doubt, these fluctuations were centered around the colorful ball of light. At first glance, it was as if all the energy in this world was surging with its breathing. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes dangerously, but the corners of her lips curled up into a smile. The thing that wanted to stop me earlier, was it? That's right. Within the colorful ball of light, there is a divine power stored, and very obviously, it also has a trace of the northern underworld Taizu's consciousness from back then. It probably sensed that you were a threat to it first, and that's why it was so hostile towards you. Taizu's voice came into her ears. From the moment you split open the barrier, it should have sensed something, and that's why there was a series of troubles after that. Chu Luyue laughed softly. Looks like it really thinks highly of me. Then wouldn't it be inappropriate if I don't give it a gift in return? Previously, she wasn't interested in the three essences as one. She only wanted to save Mu Hongyu and the others after entering, and ensure their safety. She didn't expect that before she even made a move, the other party had already set its sights on her, and even tried to trap her in that chaotic space. She had always followed a principle. If others didn't offend her, she wouldn't offend them. If others offended her, she would eliminate them completely. Taizu pondered for a moment. Are you really going to snatch that divine power of yours? You have to know that with your current strength, if you want to defeat those people and withstand the pressure of this divine power, it's not that easy. Just Jun Jiuqing alone was already very difficult to deal with. He was Prince Baiming. How could he allow others to snatch the divine power left behind by Taizu? Swoosh. A black light flashed in Chu Luyue's hand. The long yuan sword was in her hand. Whether I can snatch it or not, we'll only know after I snatch it. With that she leaped. She quickly landed at the foot of the main peak. The legendary three-eyed eagle's figure instantly disappeared in midair and returned to Chu Luyue's body. Chu Luyue looked up and began to climb. Chu Luyue was the last to reach the main peak. Without a doubt, she chose to climb the mountain at this moment, because it would be several times more difficult than the others. After all, when the others climbed the mountain earlier, they didn't have the forceful force and pressure of three elements as one-to-one to stop them. At this moment, that terrifying force enveloped the entire main peak. Every step was extremely difficult. Fortunately, Chu Luyue's injuries weren't serious. Moreover, she had the pure gold armor and the long yuan sword. The path up wasn't that difficult. She walked up like this for a while. Not long after, she met a young man. At this moment, the young man was hurriedly running toward the foot of the mountain. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Chu Luyue. The two of them looked at each other. The young man hesitated for a moment, and then suddenly opened his eyes wide. You are. Chu Luyue recognized this face. It seemed to be from the Xian dynasty. She gently nodded her head in acknowledgement and continued to ascend. Hey, you're going up? The young man was a little confused and hurriedly asked. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows. Wasn't it obvious? It's very dangerous up there. The young man waved his hand, and there was still some lingering fear in his expression. "You'd better hurry up and go down with me, Chu Luiyue," she smiled. "Thank you, but there's no need." Seeing that she didn't listen to his advice, the young man became more and more anxious. "Aya, you just came up from below, so you don't know. The closer you get to the top of the mountain, the heavier the pressure you'll suffer, and the more dangerous it is. Don't take it lightly." At this moment, a second Tianlei came down from the surging dark clouds in the sky. Rumble! The colorful light ball shone brightly. Then endless orange force surged out. Like a cliff collapsing, it flowed out rapidly. Soon, that terrifying force surged to where the two of them were. "Look, I told you it's dangerous," the young man said anxiously, but before he could finish his sentence, he stopped abruptly. That was because the origin power had stopped just one step away from the woman. Digression. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation at around 6:30 p.m. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 983. She stood there quietly and did nothing. But the power and pressure that seemed terrifying to others didn't seem to pose any threat to her. Vaguely, one could only see streaks of golden light surging around her body. Chu Luiyue was actually slightly shocked, because only at this moment did she realize that the pure gold sacred armor seemed to be even stronger than before. This was too strange. After all, it wasn't the first time she used the pure gold armor, but there had never been such a sign before. It was very strong enough to allow her to escape unscathed after fighting with 3 rank 8 warriors alone. But it didn't seem to be to such an extent. Chu Luiyue suppressed this doubt and raised her hand. A streak of orange force flew over and entered her body silently. Although this force was a little dangerous, it still contained extremely strong power. It was a pity to be completely isolated. What should be used should still be used, right? Seeing Chu Luiyue's series of actions, the young man was dumbfounded. What was she doing? Others couldn't wait to avoid it, but she was actually so interested, and even took the initiative to guide that force into her body. At this moment, a pressure rapidly approached from above. He was careless and didn't notice this danger in time. By the time he realized that something was wrong, the orange force had already caught up to his face. It was about to completely crush him. Chi! A black light flashed quickly and blocked this terrifying force. In an instant, the orange light scattered in all directions. This place will become even more dangerous later. It's safer for you to leave as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue kept the long yuan sword and left after saying that. She lifted her leg and went up. The young man looked at her figure in a daze for a while before shouting, "Thank you." Chu Luiyue's figure was already far away. He pursed his lips and finally continued to walk to the foot of the mountain. When Chu Luiyue was halfway up the mountain, she had already received 3 waves of force. Just as he had expected, the higher he went, the stronger the pressure he had to endure, and the more dangerous the situation he was in. However, not only did her speed not slow down, but it also gradually increased. Because the feeling of devouring the force seemed to be quite good, Chu Luiyue continued to absorb the surrounding force as she walked up. After all, it was an existence that contained divine power. The force that surged out of the colorful light was much purer than the ordinary force outside. Chu Luiyue faintly felt that she had touched that invisible barrier again. Rank 7 warrior. When the power of the 3 essences as one poured down, she might be able to break through. As Chu Luiyue continued to walk up, she would occasionally hear a few screams. It was likely that those who had tried to climb the mountain before were unable to withstand the power, which was why it was like this. By the time she was 2/3 of the way there, the 5th wave had already appeared. This time, 2 figures flew down from the top of the mountain. Of course, it was obvious that he had been eliminated. Chu Luiyue looked from afar and found their figures familiar. They seemed to be from the Baiming dynasty and the Xian dynasty. She looked up and raised her eyebrows slightly. Jian Fengqi and the others had actually persevered until now. Boom! The 7th Tianlei fell and struck the ball of light. At this moment, it was no longer the colorful ball of light at the beginning. There were only 3 colors left. And this Tianlei strike set off a terrifying energy tide once again. This time, the energy was a demonic purple. It fell from the sky and swept away. At this moment, the main peak, along with the surrounding peaks, had almost all become bare. Cracks could be seen everywhere on the mountain. It was a mess. However, only the top of the main peak was still as smooth as before. At that moment, there were only a few people left on the platform. Gong Sunyu was the only one left in the Xian dynasty. The slightly plump man was the only one left in the East Com dynasty. Even the Baiming dynasty was only left with Jun Jiuqing and Qing Dai. But, other than that, the 5 people from the Tianling dynasty were still here. Although they were not in good condition, they were still here in one piece. Of course, Dumpling contributed to this, but it was also because of their concerted efforts. Mu Hongyu had a faint essence body, and could temporarily freeze the surrounding space. Just this point alone allowed them to avoid the most powerful attacks. This was why none of them had been eliminated until now. The colorful lights around them flickered. Chang Wanzhou leaned to the side and did not move. Only the pattern between his eyebrows became brighter. The 7th force spread out. At this moment, only silver and gold were left on the ball of light, and the outline inside gradually became clear. It seemed to be a flower. Unfortunately, at this moment, they could not see what it was from the outside. Jun Jiuqing stared at the ball of light, keeping a secret. Boom! The 8th force. In an instant, silver light illuminated the world. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and looked up. In midair, the ball of golden light burned fiercely like a flame. An unparalleled pressure was oppressive. The golden light flowed, and one could vaguely see that there seemed to be a flower budding inside. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. For some reason, a strong sense of familiarity suddenly arose in the depths of her heart. She subconsciously gripped the long yuan sword tightly, jumped up, and went straight to the top of the mountain. At this moment the light flickered, and she finally saw what was inside. It was actually a peach blossom. Digression. Oh, I forgot to tell you that the answer was to sleep on the floor of February. I wanted to let you sleep in the room, but they all said that you were kicked out. Rongxiao. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 984. At the same time, Jun Jiuqing also saw this scene. His blood-red eyes flashed with a touch of impatience and killing intent. You're really haunting me. How annoying. His thin lips curled into a smile, but the corners of his eyes were very cold. His hoarse and deep voice sounded a little gloomy at this moment. Qing Dai, who was standing behind him, could not help but look up when she heard this. Unfortunately, the golden ball of light was shining brightly, and she could not see what was inside. She quickly glanced at Jun Jiuqing from the corner of her eyes, and she was a little curious. His Highness the Crown Prince seemed to be temperamental, but in fact, he was very cold and indifferent most of the time. There were very few things that could catch his eye, let alone affect his mood. But just now, he seemed to have seen something in the ball of light, and the aura around him suddenly became cold and gloomy. This kind of situation was really rare. Moreover, His Highness had already inherited most of the power of 3 elements as one. He was only one step away from successfully inheriting the endless force. What was there to be annoyed about? However, before she could think clearly, an extremely dangerous aura suddenly attacked her from all directions. Silver origin power roiled wildly under the dark sky like an unceasing torrent of a river. In front of this power, the people on the top of the mountain were very small. When the silver force fell from the sky, it was like a huge wave washing away the sand. 2. Qing Dai had just opened her mouth when her body was swept away uncontrollably. She almost subconsciously wanted to circulate the force in her body to reduce this part of the power, but it was impossible. Her little bit of power was so insignificant at this time. The terrifying power intertwined and squeezed, and it almost made her internal organs burst. Then, her vision turned black, and her body was instantly thrown away. Bang! Qing Dai crashed heavily into a mountain beside her. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her body kept falling. In the end, she fell on a protruding rock, and a few of her bones were broken. She wanted to support her body to stand up, But it was futile. She could only rely on her right arm, which was the only one that was still intact, to stand up. Ignoring the injuries on her body, she immediately raised her head to look at the main peak. At this moment, the sky above ancient Phoenix Mountain had already been completely covered by rolling dark clouds. Between heaven and earth, there was only darkness. A golden ball of light floated in the air, shining so brightly that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Its entire body was exuding a sacred and powerful aura. It made people unconsciously revere him. Below the golden ball of light was a ring-shaped silver sea that completely enveloped the main peak. The various colors of origin power that had appeared before all appeared dim and lifeless under the illumination of the silver light. From afar, the tiny specks of color were nothing more than the edges of the huge ring-shaped silver sea. They were not worth mentioning. Similarly, the power that erupted this time was several times greater than before. Qing Dai looked at it nervously, as if she was searching for something. Soon, she saw a tall figure leaping out from the silver sea. Evil, flamboyant, demonic. Yet he was incomparably powerful. Qing Dai's heart finally settled down. "I'm alright, cough cough." She closed her eyes and rejoiced. Although the blood between her lips and teeth stimulated her to keep coughing, as long as she saw that he could succeed, everything else didn't matter. When the 8th Tianlei came down, the three essences as one erupted with unprecedented power. On that mountaintop, the only one who could persist and stay should be His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Thinking of this, Qing Dai's eyes were filled with admiration and admiration. As if to confirm her guess, a few more figures were kicked out by the violent force one after another. She took a look and saw that they were the two people from the East Kam dynasty and the Xian dynasty. After that, another red figure was flung out from the silver sea. Red-tailed phoenix. In the midst of the chaos, it flapped its wings and hurriedly stabilized its body. Upon closer inspection, it seemed to be carrying a few people with its claws. Those were obviously the people from the Tianling dynasty. Qing Dai had always felt a little uncomfortable with their appearance. When she saw this scene, her mood immediately became much better. Even the injuries on her body were not so serious. As such, only His Highness the Crown Prince was left on the mountaintop. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, a sharp whistling sound broke through the air. After that, a slender and tall figure actually leaped up from below. The sword aura was awe-inspiring. It broke through the silver sea. Qing Dai's eyes suddenly widened. Shangguanyu. After breaking through the layers of force, Chu Luiyue felt as if a mountain was on her shoulders. It was incomparably heavy. However, the moment she broke through everything and leaped into the air, the heavy pressure instantly disappeared. Above her head, golden light was shining, and under her feet, silver waves were sparkling. In all directions, there was an incomparably pure and majestic power. Everything was fine except for Jun Jiuqing, who was not far away. Sensing this movement, Jun Jiuqing looked over. There was no surprise on his handsome face that was almost devilishly handsome. Instead, he raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and said slowly, "You're much slower than I expected." He originally thought that she would at most be a little slower than him, but he did not expect that she almost did not catch up. However, to be able to climb all the way up from the foot of the mountain, under the condition of 3 elemental, as one's prominence was not to be underestimated. Chu Luiyue glanced at him with an indifferent expression. "It's fine as long as you caught up. What's the matter if it's sooner or later?" Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. "Your strength is not as strong as before, but your temperament is still the same." She had always been like this, overly arrogant. There were many arrogant people in this world, including Jun Jiuqing himself. He always disliked such people, but he always felt that she was a little different from others. Therefore, after seeing this many times, he felt a little interested. Chu Luiyue pretended that she did not hear anything. Jun Jiuqing knew her identity a long time ago, and he knew her even more than she knew herself. It would be fine if he could say something useful, but unfortunately, he always said such specious and meaningless words. It was extremely boring. She looked up at the golden ball of light and went straight to the point. It seems that only one person can inherit the endless force of 3 elemental as one's prominence, as well as the divine power in it. Jun Jiuqing was not surprised. You want to compete with I? Chu Liuyue's lips curled up slightly. Although this originally belonged to Baiming Taizu. But, since we're already here, wouldn't it be a pity if we don't give it a try? You're no match for I. Jun Jiuqing was calm and composed. Even if he helps you, distant water can't put out a nearby fire. The result will be the same. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. Him. However, if you want this thing, it's not impossible. Jun Jiuqing looked at her. His eyes deep and his thin lips slightly curled. His voice was low and hoarse, like a warm night breeze brushing past her ear. As long as I signs the marriage contract, all of this will be yours. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 985. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes and sneered. Thank you for your kindness, but I'm not interested in this proposal. Besides, Prince Baiming is very resourceful. Don't tell me he doesn't know that I already have a fiancé? It doesn't seem appropriate to say that. You said it yourself. Since you're not married yet, there's still a chance for others. Besides, there are many couples in this world who choose to divorce because they can't live together. You're not the only one. The smile in Jun Jiuqing's eyes deepened, as if he didn't realize how inappropriate his words were at this time. I don't have much patience, but I can still wait. Then you might be disappointed. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows and smiled. Perhaps if you wait like this, you will directly wait until the day you die. Why bother? Jun Jiuqing's eyes darkened. A cold aura surged around him. Chu Liyue's body tensed up, and she held the long yuan sword tightly. No one would be happy to hear this, not to mention the high and mighty Prince Baiming. However, just as Chu Liyue thought that Jun Jiuqing was going to attack in anger, the dangerous aura around him gradually dissipated. Sure enough, he was still the same as before. He wasn't likable at all. Jun Jiuqing retracted his gaze and looked at the golden ball of light. His thin lips curled into a cold smile. Since that's the case, I won't be polite with you. Whenever she mentioned that person, the expression on her face would always make him angry. Now that she had changed her physical body and lost her memories, she still treated that person like that. How annoying. At this moment, the 9th Tianlei finally fell. Boom! The Tianlei fell and collided with the golden ball of light. Dazzling starlight exploded instantly. It surged in all directions. At this moment, the world lost its color. It was as if an invisible hand had torn open a huge hole in the dark sky, from which a river of dazzling golden light was gushing out. In an instant, it covered everything. The figures of Chu Liyue and Jun Jiuqing were also swallowed up in an instant. All of the onlookers who saw this scene were all on edge. That was His Majesty just now, right? Yuan Jinghong asked anxiously. Just now. They had all been thrown out by that violent force, and were barely able to stabilize themselves with Dumpling's help. Now they were all halfway up another mountain. Although it was still impossible to avoid the terrifying pressure here, it was still much safer than before. He had thought that there was no hope for him to compete, but he had never expected that at the last moment, Chu Liyue would appear. However, the thought that her opponent was Jun Jiuqing made her feel uneasy. Jun Jiuqing was extremely strong. Moreover, it was Prince Baiming. It could be said that they had the upper hand. Compared to him, Chu Liyue really didn't have much of an advantage. Nothing will happen to her, right? That was the last force of 3 essences as one. The position where the 2 of them were at previously could be said to be the first to bear the brunt of the impact. They had already retreated so far away. Just by feeling the pressure of the aftershocks, they felt that it was unbearable. The position in the middle was really unimaginable. She will be fine. Mu Hongyu stared at the sea of gold and silver in the sky and said firmly and seriously, no matter what the situation was, she could always handle it. This time it was the same. Ugh! A low groan of pain was heard. It was Chang Wanzhou who was curled up in a ball. His eyes were tightly shut, as if he was going through terrible torture. Wu Ming called out to him a few times, but he didn't wake up. Chang! Wu Ming instinctively reached out to pat him. However, the moment he touched his body, he gasped and quickly withdrew his hand. It's so cold. Chang Wanzhou's body was actually as cold as an ice cube. No, this chill was even colder than that. Come and take a look. What's the matter with him? Wu Ming's nervous look surprised the others. Jian Fengqi came forward, intending to check his pulse. It was bone-chilling. He immediately frowned. With just a touch, he felt as if there was a cold force flowing from his palm to his limbs and bones. With a thought, a ball of flame suddenly appeared in his hand. Relying on the isolation of the flame, he held Chang Wanzhou's shoulder and turned him over. With this look, Jian Fengqi's expression changed slightly. The others were also stunned on the spot. Because Chang Wanzhou's face was covered with a thin layer of frost, there was a strange rune between his eyebrows that was faintly discernible. And the terrible chill was spreading from that rune. What's wrong with him? Mu Hongyu's eyes widened slightly, and she looked confused and shocked. Jian Fengqi let go of his hand. Don't touch him first. Once this cold force enters his body, it's extremely difficult to remove. He had only touched him a few more times, but the chill almost froze his palm. If he hadn't mobilized the flame in advance to block it, he was afraid. There seems to be a seal in his body that's about to be broken. A seal? Didn't he grow up in Nanjiang? How could there be a seal? Yuan Jinghong asked curiously. Jian Fengqi shook his head. Suddenly, he remembered something and looked back at the dazzling scene on the main peak. Waves of aftershocks were spreading rapidly with that place as the center. Perhaps, it's the power of the three essences as one that helped him, Jian Fengqi said, but his frown deepened. Because he didn't know whether this was helping Chang Wanzhou or, at this moment, Chang Wanzhou curled up even tighter, and a light flashed between his eyebrows. When the terrible golden force came crashing down, Chu Liyue didn't even have time to react before she was hit hard on the top of the mountain. Bam! A sharp pain came from her back. It almost made Chu Liyue's mind go blank for a moment. She stabbed the long yuan sword into the ground and tried to stand up, but she found that she was burdened with the power of a king, and every movement was very difficult. The last force of three essences as one fell from the sky, and the endless force that had been accumulated for thousands of years gushed out. The pressure was naturally unimaginable for ordinary people. Needless to say, there was also a trace of divine power mixed in. Chu Liyue forcefully swallowed the sweet and fishy taste in her mouth. She moved slowly, and the hard armor rubbed against the ground, making an ear-piercing sound. Chu Liyue gritted her teeth. She knew that if it wasn't for the pure gold armor, her life would have been ended just now. She looked up and saw that Jun Jiuqing was still standing in midair, and his body was covered with endless radiance. Compared to her, he was obviously more relaxed. In the end, it was because her realm and strength were not enough that she was in such a sorry state. Girl, do you still want to continue? Taizu asked worriedly. With her current level, to deal with such a situation was really... Of course, Chu Liyue said through gritted teeth. As soon as she finished speaking, a black shield appeared in front of her. She stared at the black shield in front of her and muttered softly, "Whether or not I can do it this time depends on you." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 986. Clang. The simple and heavy black shield landed heavily on the ground, and a few cracks instantly appeared. Chu Liyue looked down and saw the spreading cracks, and her pupils shrank. One had to know that even the long yuan sword did not leave any marks on the ground. She had already noticed that this smooth and tidy mountaintop was very different from the other places. The other mountain peaks had long since been destroyed by the continuous origin tides. Even the main peak was in a mess. However, this mountaintop was completely unscathed, and this black shield had only landed on the ground, and it had actually cracked in an instant. Chu Liyue had vaguely felt that this black shield was very mysterious, and it seemed to be stronger than expected. Now it seemed that she was right. With the help of this black shield, the pressure Chu Liyue had to endure was instantly reduced by a lot. This also gave her a chance to breathe. After quickly adjusting her breathing, she began to think of her next move. Without a doubt, Jun Jiuqing had the advantage over her in all aspects, and it would be very difficult for her to obtain the final victory. However, since she was already here, she had to give it a try. Moreover, she had not gotten back everything that she had suffered in that chaotic space. Chu Luiyue looked up. The golden force that surrounded Jun Jiuqing was rapidly being devoured by him. The force tide caused by the three essences, as one's prominence depended on one's ability. If one could devour one more force than the others, it would be considered a victory. The more force one devoured, the more one's strength would increase. Of course, this also depended on the various aspects of each cultivator. If one was blindly greedy for force, and did not care about one's own limits, it would only be harmful in the end. At this moment, a small golden peach blossom fell silently. Chu Luiyue almost instinctively reached out and caught the peach blossom. At first glance, Chu Luiyue was sure that this was the one she saw in the golden ball of light. However, the moment she touched it, the peach blossom quietly dissipated, transforming into a few streaks of flowing light and entering her palm. A warm energy flowed into his limbs and bones. The internal injuries he had sustained earlier were actually beginning to recover rapidly. Chu Luiyue was shocked. This doesn't seem to be the power of the three essences as one, but how did it appear there? Moreover, it just so happened to be in the shape of a peach blossom. Boom! Boom! Chu Luiyue didn't have time to think about these questions. Waves of power surged toward him again. She took a deep look at her palm. Soon after, she put away these thoughts and sat down cross-legged with her hands placed on her knees. Boundless golden origin power descended from the sky like a flood, completely enveloping her within. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and began to frantically devour the surrounding energy. Chu Luiyue absorbed the origin power of heaven and earth at an extremely fast speed. Soon, a golden energy vortex appeared above her head. At the same time, her aura was rising rapidly. However, this didn't make Mu Hongyu and the others who were watching feel at ease. Instead, they were even more worried. How can Her Majesty devour the origin power so quickly? This is too dangerous. She's only at the peak of the 6th rank now. Yuan Jinghong's face was full of panic. At this rate, in less than a quarter of an hour, her body would not be able to take it anymore. However, even though they were full of worry, they couldn't get close to the main peak at this time. They could only watch helplessly. Mu Hongyu clenched her fists, her heart also clenched tightly. She pursed her lips and said firmly, "I believe she knows what she's doing. I believe that she knows what she's doing. She can definitely do it. She's overestimating herself." After Gong Sunyu was knocked down, he didn't suffer any serious injuries. However, when he saw the situation at the top of the mountain, he was still full of dissatisfaction. He had nothing to say about Jun Jiuqing staying and inheriting this power. However, what was going on with that Shang Guanyu? It was fine if she suddenly barged into the ancient Phoenix Mountain. But now she wants to compete with Jun Jiuqing? Who gave her the courage to do so? Qing Dai treated the injuries on her body with difficulty and stared at the main peak without blinking. Shang Guanyu wants to snatch the last power. Why didn't His Highness stop her? When the two of them were confronting each other just now, he clearly had the time and opportunity. Qing Dai bit her lips. She had been following His Highness since she was young. Although she didn't dare to say that she knew him very well, she was familiar with his character and could somewhat guess his thoughts. He had always hated people fighting for what belonged to him. This time, he was determined to win the opening of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be so polite to Shang Guanyu. Qing Dai felt even more uncomfortable when she thought of the meaningful look he gave her before. Could it be that His Highness is really interested in Shang Guanyu? Thinking of this, Qing Dai unconsciously clenched her sleeves. It wasn't just these people. At this moment, the people waiting outside the barrier also saw this scene. Everyone had different reactions. Shang Guanyu is still going for that. Gong Sun Xiao had a complicated look on his face as he silently glanced at Jun Qiji. Jun Qiji was still calm. He stroked his beard and said, "It's good for young people to be aggressive." In other words, Shang Guanyu would definitely not be able to defeat Jun Jiuqing. In fact, most of the people present had the same thought. Shang Guanyu had no chance of winning this battle. She seems to have used something to block in front of her. Ning Yuan suddenly said. Unfortunately, they could only see a rough outline, and couldn't see it clearly. It seems to be a shield, Tan Taichen sneered. Whether it's a shield or something else, the outcome is already decided. There was still a trace of divine power in the boundless force. Even if Shang Guanyu had a divine weapon, it was impossible for her to fight against it with her current strength. She was definitely going to lose this battle. From Tan Taichen's point of view, he was even happy to see Shang Guanyu digging her own grave. The more arrogant she was, the worse she would end up. It would be a piece of cake to deal with her after she came out of the barrier. In the blink of an eye, 15 minutes had passed. Chu Luyue was still as motionless as a mountain, as she continued to devour the force around her. Yuan Jinghong and the others were shocked. According to their previous calculations, Chu Luyue would only be able to hold on for another 15 minutes before she collapsed. However, from the looks of it, it seemed like there wasn't much of a problem. The few of them could only continue to wait anxiously. However, they didn't expect to wait for an hour. At this time, Chu Luyue was still motionless. Judging from the golden origin vortex above her head, one could tell that she was still rapidly devouring the energy. Her body was like a bottomless pit, sucking in all of this energy. Yuan Jinghong's heart, which had calmed down a little, started to tremble again. Why hasn't Her Majesty stopped yet? Digression. Let's continue in the afternoon. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 987. She stood there quietly, and did not do anything. However, the power and pressure that everyone else thought was extremely terrifying did not seem to pose any threat to her. Vaguely, one could only see streaks of golden flowing light surging around her body. Actually, Chu Luyue was also slightly taken aback, because at this moment, she realized that this scarlet gold holy armor seemed to have a stronger defense than before. This was too strange. After all, this was not the first time she had used the scarlet gold holy armor. However, there had never been such signs before. It was very strong, so strong that it could allow her to fight against 3 rank 8 martial artists alone, and escape unscathed. However, it did not seem to be to this extent. Chu Luyue suppressed this doubt, and raised her hand. An orange origin force flew over, and surged into her body silently. Although it was somewhat dangerous to pour this origin power downward, it still contained an extremely great amount of power. It was a pity to be completely isolated from the outside world. She still had to make use of what she had to, right? Seeing Chu Luyue's series of actions, the youth was dumbfounded. What was she doing? She was actually so interested in something that others could not avoid, and even took the initiative to guide that power into her body. At this moment, a pressure rapidly approached from above. He had been careless, and did not notice this danger in time. By the time he realized that something was wrong, an orange origin force had already caught up to him. It looked like it was about to completely crush him. A streak of black light flashed and blocked the terrifying power. In an instant, the orange light scattered in all directions. This place will become even more dangerous later. It's safer for you to leave as soon as possible. Chu Luyue put away the Dragon Abyss sword, and said this before walking up. The youth stared at her figure in a daze for a long time before shouting out loudly, "Thank you." However, Chu Luyue's figure was already far away. He pursed his lips and finally continued walking towards the foot of the mountain. When Chu Luyue was halfway up the mountain, she had already endured 3 origin force waves. Just as she had expected, the higher she went, the stronger the pressure she had to endure, and the more dangerous the situation she was in. However, not only did she not slow down, she gradually increased her speed. Because the feeling of devouring these origin forces seemed to be quite good. As Chu Luyue walked up, she continuously absorbed the energy around her. After all, it was an existence that contained divine power. The origin force that gushed out from the colorful ball of light was also much purer than the ordinary origin force outside. Chu Luyue vaguely felt that she had touched that invisible barrier again, a rank 7 martial artist. When the power of 3 elements at one's prominence was completely poured down, she might be able to break through. As Chu Luyue continued to ascend, he would occasionally hear a few cries of agony. It should be those who had tried to climb the mountain previously and could not withstand the power, which was why they were like this. When she was 2/3 of the way up, there was already a 5th wave of origin force. This time, 2 figures flew down from the top of the mountain. Of course, it was obvious that they had been eliminated. Chu Luyue looked at them from afar and found that their figures were a little familiar. They seemed to be people from the Baiming dynasty and the Xian dynasty. She looked up and raised her eyebrows slightly. Jian Fengqi and the others had actually persisted until now. Boom! The 7th heavenly lightning fell and struck the ball of light. At this moment, it was no longer the colorful ball of light at the beginning. There were only 3 intertwining colors left. And when this heavenly lightning struck, it set off a terrifying tide of energy once again. This time, the energy was a demonic purple. It fell from the sky and swept away. At this moment, the main peak, along with the surrounding peaks, were almost all bare. On the mountain, cracks could be seen everywhere, and it was a mess. However, only the top of the main peak was still as smooth and clean as before. At this moment, there were only a few people left on top of it. Only Gong Sunyu was left in the Xian dynasty. Only the slightly chubby man was left in the Dongning dynasty. Even the Baiming dynasty only had Jun Jiuqing and Qing Dai left. But other than them, the 5 people from the Tianling dynasty were still here. Although they weren't in a good condition, they were still in one piece. Of course, part of this was due to Tuanzi's efforts, but it was also due to their united efforts. Mu Hongyu had a virtual essence body and could temporarily freeze the surrounding space. Relying on this alone, they could avoid the most powerful attacks. That was why none of them had been eliminated until now. The surrounding lights of various colors flickered. Chang Wanzhou leaned to the side and didn't move at all. Only the pattern between his eyebrows was getting brighter. The 7th wave of energy spread out. At this moment, there were only silver and gold intertwining on the ball of light, and the outline inside was gradually becoming clearer. It seemed to be a flower. Unfortunately, at this moment, they couldn't see what it was from the outside. Jun Jiuqing stared at the ball of light tightly, looking secretive. Boom! The 8th wave. In an instant, the silver light lit up the world. Chu Luyue seemed to sense it and looked up. In midair, the ball of golden light was burning like a flame. The supreme pressure was impressive. The golden light flowed, and one could vaguely see that there seemed to be a flower bud inside. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt a strong sense of familiarity. She subconsciously gripped the dragon abyss sword tightly, jumped up, and headed straight for the top of the mountain. At this moment the light flickered, and she finally saw what was inside clearly. It was a peach blossom. Digression. I forgot to tell you that the answer is to sleep on the floor, Yu. I wanted to let you sleep in the room, but they all said that you were chased out. Rongxiao. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit the website. Chapter 988. At the same time, Jun Jiuqing also saw this scene. There was a touch of impatience and murderous intent in his blood-red eyes. You're really haunting me. I'm so annoyed. His thin lips were slightly raised into a smile, but the corners of his eyes and the tip of his eyebrows were very cold. His hoarse and deep voice sounded a little gloomy at this moment. Qing Dai, who was standing behind him, couldn't help but look up when she heard this. Unfortunately, the golden ball of light was flowing and shining, and she couldn't see what was inside. She quickly glanced at Jun Jiuqing out of the corner of her eyes, feeling a little curious. His Royal Highness Crown Prince seemed to be moody, but in fact, he was very cold and indifferent in most situations. There were very few things that could enter his eyes, let alone affect his emotions. But just now he seemed to have seen something appear in the ball of light, and the aura around him suddenly became cold and gloomy. This kind of situation was really rare. Moreover, His Royal Highness had already inherited most of the power of 3 primordial convergence, and was only one step away from successfully inheriting the endless origin force. What was there to be annoyed about? However, before she could think clearly, an extremely dangerous aura suddenly attacked from all directions. Under the gloomy sky, the silver origin power surged violently like a surging river, surging forward in torrents. And the people on top of the mountain seemed very insignificant in front of this power. When the silver origin force fell from the sky, it was instantly like a big wave washing away the sand. 2. Just as Qingdai opened her mouth, her body was swept away uncontrollably. She almost subconsciously wanted to operate the origin force in her body to reduce this part of the power. But it was impossible. Her little bit of power seemed so insignificant at this moment. The terrifying power intertwined with each other, and it almost made her internal organs burst. Then her vision turned black, and her body was thrown out instantly. Bang! Qingdai crashed heavily on a mountain peak next to her. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her body kept falling, and finally fell on a protruding rock, and a few bones were broken. She wanted to support her body to stand up, but it was useless. She could only rely on her right arm, which was still intact, to force herself to stand up. She didn't care about her injuries, and immediately raised her head to look at the main peak. At this time, the sky above the ancient Phoenix Mountain had been completely covered by rolling dark clouds. Between heaven and earth it was dark. A golden ball of light floated in the air, shining so brightly that people almost couldn't open their eyes, and its whole body was emitting a holy and powerful aura. It made people unconsciously feel awe. And under the golden ball of light was a ring-shaped silver sea, which completely covered the main peak. The origin powers of all colors that had appeared before were now dim and lifeless under the silvery radiance. Looking from afar, the little bit of color was just the edge of the huge ring-shaped silver sea, and it was not worth mentioning. Similarly, the power that erupted this time was also several times more than before. Qingdai looked at it nervously, and she quickly searched for something. In next to no time, she saw a tall figure leaping up from the silver ocean. Evil, ostentatious, and demonic. But it was incomparably powerful. Qingdai's heart that was hanging in suspense finally calmed down. It's okay. Ahem. She closed her eyes, feeling very lucky. Although the rolling blood and qi between her lips and teeth stimulated her to cough continuously. As long as she saw that he could succeed, everything else didn't matter. When the 8th heavenly thunder came down, the 3 primordial convergence at one's prominence burst out with unprecedented power. On that mountaintop, the only one who could persevere and stay should be His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Thinking of this, Qingdai's eyes were full of admiration and admiration. As if to confirm her guess, a few figures were kicked out one after another by the violent force. She looked at them, and saw that they were the 2 people from the East Kam dynasty and the Xian dynasty. Then, another crimson figure was flung out from the silver sea, a red-tailed red phoenix. In the chaos, it flapped its wings and hurriedly steadied itself. Looking closely, it seemed to be carrying a few people on its claws. Obviously, they were the people from the Tianling dynasty. Qingdai had been a little uncomfortable with their appearance, but when she saw this scene, her mood instantly improved a lot, and even the pain on her body wasn't so serious. So on that mountain top, only His Highness the Crown Prince was left. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, a sharp whistling sound pierced through the air. Immediately after, a slender and tall figure leaped up from below. Sword Qi was awe-inspiring. It broke through the silver sea. Qingdai's eyes suddenly widened. Shangguanyu. Breaking through the layers of origin power, Chu Liyue felt as if a mountain was on her shoulders. It was extremely heavy. However, the moment she broke through everything and leaped up, the heavy pressure instantly disappeared. Golden light shone above her head, and silver ripples sparkled under her feet. In all directions, there was an incomparably pure and majestic power. Everything was fine, except for Jun Jiuqing, who was not far away. Noticing the commotion, Jun Jiuqing looked over. There was no surprise on his handsome, almost devilishly handsome face. Instead, his sword-like eyebrows were slightly raised, and he said slowly, "You're much slower than I expected." He originally thought that she would at most be a little slower than him, but he didn't expect that she almost didn't make it. However, to be able to come all the way up from the foot of the mountain, under the situation of the three primordial ones, at one's prominence was not to be underestimated. Chu Liyue glanced at him with an indifferent expression. "It's fine as long as you made it. So what if it's sooner or later?" Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly with a faint smile. Her strength is not as good as before, but her temper is still the same. She had always been like this, overly arrogant. There were many arrogant people in this world, including Jun Jiuqing himself. He had always disliked people like this, but he always felt that she was a little different from others. Therefore, after seeing her like this for a long time, he felt a little interested. Chu Liyue pretended not to hear anything. Jun Jiuqing had known her identity a long time ago, and he knew her better than she knew herself. It would be fine if he could say something useful, but unfortunately, he always said such specious and meaningless words. It was extremely boring. She looked up at the golden ball of light and went straight to the point. It seems that only one person can inherit the endless origin force of the three primordial ones at one's prominence, and the divine power within it. Jun Jiuqing was not surprised. "You want to compete with me?" Chu Liyue's lips curled slightly. Although this originally belonged to the great ancestor of the North Sea, but since we are already here, wouldn't it be a pity not to try? "You are no match for me." Jun Jiuqing was calm and composed. "Even if he helps you, distant water can't put out a nearby fire. The result will be the same." Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. However, if you want this thing, there is a way." Jun Jiuqing looked at her, his eyes deep and his thin lips curled slightly. His voice was low and hoarse, like a slightly warm night breeze blowing past her ears. "As long as I sign the marriage contract, all of this will be yours." Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit the website. Chapter 989. Preposterous. Tan Taichen sneered. "Is Sheng Guanyu crazy? She actually wants to try to break through at this time. She must be dreaming. Three essences as one. The boundless force that had been accumulated in the ancient Phoenix Mountain for thousands of years poured down violently. How could she be allowed to slowly break through? Furthermore, she was previously at the peak of rank 6. What she was about to cross was the threshold of rank 7. Ordinary cultivators would need to prepare for a long time in order to successfully break through this realm. They would only dare to try after ensuring that nothing would go wrong. However, Sheng Guanyu actually wanted to break through that barrier under such circumstances? She must be tired of living. Dream on. Does she really think that she can defy the heavens? Just the boundless force alone is enough to destroy her completely. Tan Taichen scolded coldly and disdainfully. This process required a high degree of concentration and elimination of all distracting thoughts. How could Sheng Guanyu calm down while being besieged by the boundless force and divine power? She was afraid that it wouldn't be long before she would be destroyed by that terrifying pressure. There was a moment of silence. Ning Yuan slowly sat up straight and stared at the slender figure of the woman on the top of the mountain. He didn't say anything. With her peak rank 6 strength, it is already her limit to hold on until now. If she wants to continue, this is the only way for her to fight for the boundless force of three essences as one. As long as she could break through to rank 7, her strength would increase greatly. One had to know that there was a huge gap between a rank 6 warrior and a rank 7 warrior. Countless cultivators were stuck at this level and could not break through for many years. They even regretted it for the rest of their lives. It was because this threshold was simply too difficult to cross. There were 9 ranks in a martial artist. Among them, rank 3 was another stage. The process of crossing rank 3 and rank 6 was extremely important. Disregarding everything else, just the heavens canopy alone was a boundary that only rank 7 martial artists could enter and exit. It could be seen how crucial this stage was. That's not all. Gong Sun Xiao narrowed his eyes, his expression complicated. When a cultivator breaks through, they can often devour a large amount of force And the breakthrough of a rank 7 warrior is even more so. He took a deep breath and stared at the golden origin power in the sky for a long while before speaking in a deep voice. This breakthrough is also known as the God-gazing barrier. It is related to one's future development potential. To a large extent, it determines the final level a cultivator can reach. The so-called God-gazing pass referred to being able to gaze upon the God domain after crossing this pass. Of course, this was only an exaggeration. However, it was undeniable that the success or failure of this stage was of great significance to any cultivator. If he could successfully cross it, it would mean that he was one step closer to the divine realm, and there was hope for him to become one of the top powerhouses in the continent. And if he failed, he might not be able to make any more progress in this lifetime. The fact that Shang Guanyu dared to do such a thing at such an important juncture showed just how daring they were. Even if Gong Sun Xiao didn't think much of her before, he was now somewhat convinced. However, in Tan Taichen's eyes, he only felt that Shang Guanyu was arrogant and conceited. Since ancient times, those who were too greedy didn't have a good ending. She should have known this from the moment she entered. Now that she chose to break through at this time, I think she's just destroying her own future. Jun Qiji shook his head. The expression in his eyes had returned to indifference. What a pity! It was a pity that such an outstanding genius was going to be destroyed here today. The ancient Phoenix Mountain was the territory of the northern underworld. How could she compete with the 9 ministers? Even if she wanted to cause trouble, she wouldn't be able to do anything. Most of the people outside the barrier didn't think highly of this, and there were even some who were waiting to see a joke. Elder Chun Ke raised his head and looked over anxiously. Your Majesty is too impulsive. If she couldn't win, wouldn't she just give up? Anyway, she had already gone through the baptism of 8 levels of strength. Other than Jun Jiuqing, she had already won against everyone on the ancient Phoenix Mountain. This was enough to anger her to death. Why did she have to take such a risk at this time? Sun Yi's long and narrow eyes were obscure. He said indifferently, "She'll be fine." Elder Chun Ke turned to look at him, but he saw that Sun Yi's expression was very calm, as if he didn't take this matter to heart at all. How can you be so sure?" Elder Chun Ke asked with a dry throat. Sun Yi smiled. "If Elder Chun Ke doesn't believe me, you can continue watching." Her ability was far more than this. Hearing his words, Elder Su Jin and the others, who were originally very nervous, also relaxed a little. Actually, they weren't very familiar with this Sun Yi. They only knew that he started following His Majesty a few years ago. After that, he formed the 13U Guard with him as the leader. As for his origins, no one knew. Even the extent of his strength remained a mystery from the beginning to the end. However, he was the same as His Majesty. He always had an aura that made people feel at ease. Perhaps, His Majesty could indeed safely pass through this trial. Chu Liyue sat cross-legged with her eyes tightly shut. Her body was like a black hole, constantly and crazily devouring the surrounding golden origin power. Soon, her entire body was enveloped by a resplendent golden light. The intense pain gradually turned numb. There was only one thought left in her mind: devouring origin power. Countless origin power surged into her limbs and bones, crazily cleansing her Yuan meridian. It even faintly felt like it was going to burst. However, every time this happened, the water droplet in her dantian would quickly absorb all of this origin power. Countless vigorous origin power surged in, but it didn't leave any ripples on the surface. This cycle repeated, and Chu Liyue's Yuan meridian's potential was completely stimulated in this process. The water droplet spun faster and faster, crazily absorbing more and more origin power. Such a commotion shocked everyone. They originally thought that Chu Liyue wouldn't be able to hold on for long, and would explode from the origin power. However, as time passed, she was actually safe and sound. Moreover, the golden origin power that filled the sky seemed to be leaning towards her side. From afar, there seemed to be an invisible scale on top of the mountain. The 2 ends of the scale were occupied by Chu Liyue and Jun Jiuqing respectively. Previously, Jun Jiuqing had the upper hand, but now, The scale was gradually tilting towards the other side. Chu Luiyue replaced Jun Jiuqing and became the new center of the energy vortex. Jun Jiuqing wanted to reclaim the origin power, but he was shocked to find that he seemed to have lost control of it. Above the sky, the clouds were rolling, and it was boundlessly dark. At this moment, a silver snake-like Tianlei appeared in the black cumulus clouds. Rumble! In an instant, almost half of the sky was illuminated. Tan Taichen, who was outside the barrier, suddenly stood up and exclaimed, "Gazing of God's tribulation?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 990. As the name suggested, the God's Ascension Tribulation was a lightning tribulation that was summoned when a cultivator passed the God's Ascension stage. Not every cultivator who tried to break through to the 7th stage would be able to summon it. Generally speaking, only geniuses with great potential would be able to do so. Even so, most people would only summon it after they broke through to the 7th stage. It was very rare for someone to summon a lightning tribulation not long after they tried to break through to the 7th stage. How did it appear so quickly? Tan Taichun was bewildered, his face full of panic. It was expected that Shangguanyu could summon the God's Ascension Tribulation. After all, she was a genius with a Daijing Yuan meridian and had contracted a divine beast. She was considered one of the best among the younger generation. However, the God's Ascension Tribulation appeared too early. The earlier the God's Ascension Tribulation appears, the stronger the pressure it contains, and the greater the test the cultivator will face. Ning Yuan spoke slowly. His voice was deep and powerful. Of course, this also means that the cultivator will be able to reach a higher level in the future. In short, those who could summon the God's Ascension Tribulation were all geniuses. The earlier the God's Ascension Tribulation appeared, the higher the value of the talent. Tan Taichen's face was so gloomy that it looked like water could drip from it. There was no need for Ning Yuan to say these words. Everyone knew. It was precisely because of this that he was so shocked that he lost his composure. This meant that Shangguanyu's talent was stronger than they had expected. Gongsun Shao suddenly said, "This is indeed the earliest God's Ascension Tribulation that I have seen in my life." His voice was no longer casual and boastful. He sat up straight with a tense expression. Compared to before, his attitude had changed greatly. It was obvious that he had finally realized that Shangguanyu's talent and potential were far greater than what he had seen before. No wonder she could break the barrier of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Even with the help of the Taizu from Tianling, she had personally slashed down with her sword. If she didn't have the ability, how could she have fought her way to the top of the mountain, and even fought with Jun Jiuqing? Ning Yuan suddenly thought of something, and turned around to look at Jun Qiji. I wonder how long it took for Prince Baiming to summon the Divine Tribulation, when he broke through to the 7th rank. Jun Qiji didn't say anything, but his expression was much more serious than before. It was obvious that this scene had quite a big impact on him. It seems that the new emperor of the Tianling dynasty does indeed possess extraordinary talent. Just this point alone is enough to put him on par with the 9 ministers. If she was given a few more years, perhaps she could really fight the 9 ministers head-on. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Jun Qiji's words were very polite. It wasn't hard to tell that Shangguanyu's talent was on par with Jun Jiuqing's. Moreover, he said that in a few years, the two of them might be able to fight. One had to know that the current Jun Jiuqing was already a stage 9 warrior, and Shangguanyu was only at the peak of stage 6. His evaluation of Shangguanyu was actually so high. Then she has to have the ability to pass today's threshold first. Tan Taichen clenched his fists tightly, and there was a hint of madness in his eyes. Since ancient times, only 2 or 3 out of 10 people have successfully passed the Divine Tribulation. No matter how strong this Divine Tribulation is, she has to have the ability to pass it. If she fails and suffers the backlash of the Divine Tribulation, it won't be so easy. Looking at the Divine Tribulation in the sky, Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly. It was reasonable for her to be able to summon the Divine Tribulation. However, the timing was really not good. Surrounded by an endless amount of force, And there was also a divine power in front of her that was constantly threatening her. Under such circumstances, ordinary people would already be unable to take care of themselves. But she still dared to try to break through? Did she think that she didn't have enough trouble? Jun Jiuqing's eyes darkened, and the aura on his body rose again. He waved his sleeves, wanting to take back all the force. But how could it be so easy? If Chu Luiyue wanted to break through, she must devour the force of heaven and earth. This process was originally destined by the heavens, and no cultivator could stop or change it. This was also the important reason why Chu Luiyue was determined to break through at this time. No matter how powerful Jun Jiuqing was, he couldn't be stronger than the heavens. Looking at the divine tribulation swimming wildly in the clouds and growing stronger at a speed visible to the naked eye, Jun Jiuqing's expression gradually turned cold. He clearly realized that now that things had progressed to this stage, no one could stop it. As for the outcome, it all depended on her. Compared to the various reactions of the others, Chu Luiyue was the calmest one. Although her eyes were closed, she could feel the divine tribulation in the sky. Thanks to her previous life, she had experienced all of this once, so she was still considered experienced. Naturally, it was much easier to deal with it. However, there was a faint doubt in her heart. This divine tribulation did appear a little early. No, perhaps it should be said that it was abnormally early. Because this appeared even faster than when she tried to break through to a stage 7 warrior in her previous life. One had to know that she had a Tianjing Yuan meridian at that time. It was natural for her to be able to summon a powerful divine tribulation. But now, she had a Daijing Yuan meridian. How could it be even faster than that time? Chu Luiyue couldn't understand. But it didn't matter if she didn't understand. The important thing was to be prepared to survive this divine tribulation. More and more blood seeped out of her body, and her clothes were almost completely soaked. The thick smell of blood filled the tip of her nose. The wind whistled in her ears, and the turbulent golden force was constantly injected into her body, and the speed was getting faster and faster. In her dantian, a wave finally appeared on the water droplet. Buzz! The tribulation lightning in the sky suddenly struck down fiercely, as if it had sensed the ripple. Boom! Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. The first one. Long Yuan sword. She let out a clear shout. The Long Yuan sword instantly flew up and faced the divine tribulation head-on. On the sword body, several rays of light flickered. It was the Tianlei force that it contained. Rumble! The two forces collided violently, and the silver light flickered. Even the golden origin power that filled the sky was swept away by the impact. The surrounding mountains of the main peak were affected by this force and collapsed one after another. This showed how powerful it was. Gradually, the dazzling light dissipated. Countless pairs of eyes quickly looked over. On the peak of the mountain, Chu Luiyue was still sitting cross-legged, and the Long Yuan sword was suspended above her head. It was the Long Yuan sword that blocked the first divine tribulation for her. However, at this moment, the second divine tribulation that looked like a silver dragon quickly appeared in the sky. Its momentum was vast, and the pressure was deep. It was several times stronger than the previous one. Tan Taichen sneered and sat down. This divine tribulation will never stop until it sees the real person. Using any other means to block it will not be able to pass. Every time she dodges, the divine tribulation will appear again, and it will be stronger than before. I want to see what she can do this time. Digression. Yesterday's chapter number was wrong, and today it's back. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 991. The gazing godly tribulation could only be overcome by oneself. Chu Luiyue knew this. The more she tried to block and dodge, the stronger the pressure would be. She was extremely clear about this point in her heart. But she had no other choice at this time. She knew that she was not ready yet. On the one hand, she had barely gained the upper hand in the battle with Jun Jiuqing, and she had not devoured much of the golden force yet. She could not spare the time and energy to face the gazing godly tribulation head-on. On the other hand, the gazing godly tribulation appeared too early. She was still a distance away from the barrier of a rank 7 warrior, and she had no chance of winning if she rashly tried to overcome the tribulation now. So, she could only choose to let the Long Yuan sword block it for her under such circumstances. Actually, Chu Luiyue was not the only one who would do this. Many cultivators in the world would make the same choice when trying to overcome this hurdle. This was also why the earlier the gazing godly tribulation appeared, the stronger it was. It deliberately left a lot of time for the cultivator to attack again and again. If it appeared too early, the cultivator's strength would not be enough to deal with it. Once they faced it head-on, they would fail. So they could only choose to delay. And in the process of delaying, the power of the gazing godly tribulation would increase again and again. In the end, the cultivator had to be prepared to face it personally and fight with it. If they won, it would be considered as truly overcoming the gazing godly tribulation. If there was a mistake in the process, all their efforts would be in vain. Because of this, many cultivators would often make a lot of preparations and think of many ways to deal with it when they were preparing to break through to a rank 7 warrior. So when they saw Chu Luiyue trying to break through this hurdle without any preparation, everyone was so shocked and even thought that she was crazy. Wasn't it crazy to gamble with one's own life and future? After the battle just now, the power of the Long Yuan sword was partly depleted. Chu Luiyue knew that she had to be fast. As if it had sensed her thoughts, the ripples of the water droplet in her dantian suddenly increased in amplitude. This also allowed Chu Luiyue's speed of devouring force to increase again. Looking from afar, everyone could only see the endless golden origin power crazily pouring into that slender and straight figure. Countless people who were at the foot of the main peak and at the edge of the main peak were shocked to see this scene. Crazy. This is really crazy. With so much force entering the body, even a rank 7 warrior might not be able to withstand it. What was she trying to do? Do you want to die? No wonder she dares to compete with Jun Jiuqing. What can a person with such courage not do? But, don't you think that it's already very strange for her to be able to hold on until now? She's only at the peak of the 6th step. Even if it was the Daijing Yuan Meridian, it should have exploded long ago. Why does it seem like nothing has happened? What the hell? Do you guys remember that she used to have the Tianjin Yuan Meridian? Could it be that she's actually still? How is that possible? How could it be so easy to obtain a Tianjin Yuan Meridian? Then how do you explain her current situation? I saw it clearly just now. Jun Jiuqing wanted to snatch that endless origin power but failed. If not for the Tianjin Yuan Meridian, how could she do such a heaven-defying thing? The crowd discussed fervently, but Jian Fengqi and the rest fell into an eerie silence. Yuan Jinghong used her elbow to nudge Jian Fengqi and lowered her voice. Hey Fengqi, don't you think that this scene seems a little familiar? Jian Fengqi was expressionless as if he was too lazy to answer. However, when Mu Hongyu heard this, she couldn't help but look back at them and ask curiously, familiar? Have you guys seen such a situation before? Oh right. Lu Yu did seem to have broken through to become a rank 7 warrior in the past, right? Have you guys seen it? When she was in Shangguan, I heard that her rank was much higher than now. Rank 7. Shouldn't be a problem. Yuan Jinghong seemed to have thought of something, and the corner of her eyes twitched. I knew it was so familiar. When Her Majesty broke through to become a rank 7 warrior in the past, he and Jian Fengqi happened to be there, and they indeed saw it clearly. Now that he thought about it, wasn't the scene in front of him extremely similar to that time? Although it's not exactly the same in detail coincidentally, Her Majesty also broke through to become a rank 7 warrior in the process of fighting with someone. And at that time, she also summoned the god's tribulation early on. She went back and forth a few times in the middle before finally facing the attack personally. Mu Hongyu's interest was instantly piqued. I knew it. Then she must be very powerful back then, right? Yuan Jinghong looked away. Yes. Seeing that he wasn't willing to say more, Mu Hongyu snorted and looked at Jian Fengqi. Young master, you've seen it too, right? Tell me. Jian Fengqi glanced at her, and his gaze was extremely indifferent. Have you seen Jun Jiuqing? Mu Hongyu glanced at him. I've seen him. This young master is him back then. Mu Hongyu shuddered and asked with a trembling voice. Then what happened to you? Jian Fengqi smiled. His smile was extremely flirtatious, but there was no smile in his eyes. What do you think? This Jun Jiuqing, I'm afraid that his ending won't be any better than mine back then. If that pervert wants to break through, who can stop him? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, the second lightning tribulation in the sky struck down fiercely again. Boom. Digression. In the afternoon, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 992. This time, it was still the Long Yuan sword that fought. However, compared to the previous time when she had the upper hand, the situation this time had obviously changed. The power of the second lightning tribulation was much stronger than before, but the power of the Long Yuan sword was gradually depleted. With one increasing and one decreasing, they were finally evenly matched. Chu Luyue, who was directly below, could also feel the aftershock rolling over. Although the Long Yuan sword had reduced more than half of it, and it was no longer a threat to her, Chu Luyue understood that the situation would only get worse. She had to complete the breakthrough as soon as possible. She had to cross the threshold of a rank 7 warrior. Thinking of this, she took a deep breath and urged the water droplet in her body to swallow the surrounding golden force even faster. After these forces were transformed by the water droplet, they all became her strength and slowly seeped into her limbs and bones. Chu Luyue could feel the pain of her muscles, bones, and flesh being forcefully torn apart, and she could even feel that the Yuan meridian in her body was gradually approaching the limit of what it could bear. But what shocked her the most was that she had already reached this stage, but she still hadn't reached the time to break through. To break through to a rank 7 warrior, one had to pass the ascension stage and fight against the ascension stage tribulation. Ordinary cultivators would devour a portion of the heaven and earth force before breaking through to increase their strength. The more they devoured, the stronger their strength, and the higher the success rate of breaking through the threshold of a rank 7 warrior. Correspondingly, the pressure of the ascension stage tribulation to deal with would be stronger. However, as long as they succeeded, their strength after breaking through would be much higher than other cultivators of the same rank, and their potential and speed of cultivation in the future would also be greatly increased. Therefore, most people were still willing to take the risk. Chu Luyue originally calculated the time, and felt that it should be about time, but she didn't expect that after waiting for so long, the water droplet in her dantian only kept spinning and devouring these forces, but it still didn't have any intention of breaking through. Previously, she felt that she had already faintly touched the barrier of a rank 7 warrior, and thought that she would naturally break through, but she didn't expect that this step was still so far away. Chu Luyue used her divine sense to look inside, and saw the ripples on the water droplet. The 6 gorgeous lines were clear and bright, but the 7th line didn't appear. She had long known that it was extremely difficult for the water droplet to break through, but she didn't expect it to remain unmoved even after devouring so much origin power. At this moment, the third lightning tribulation had started to gather in the sky. Chu Luyue's abnormal behavior naturally attracted everyone's attention. It had been quite some time since she started trying to break through. According to reason, she should have reached the conditions for a breakthrough with the boundless golden origin power lingering around her, and her devouring speed. But as time passed, she still maintained the same posture. If it wasn't for the golden origin power flowing continuously with her at the center, one would have thought she had fainted. Yuan Jinghong couldn't help but move closer to Jian Fengqi and ask carefully, "What's the matter?" "Fengqi, I remember that when His Majesty broke through to become a stage 7 warrior, he didn't take this long. Didn't he quickly complete his breakthrough and defeat you?" Jian Fengqi glanced at him. "This young master's memory is very good. There's no need for you to mention it again." Yuan Jinghong shrunk his neck and scratched his head awkwardly. He don't misunderstand. I am just curious. After all, His Majesty doesn't have the Tianjin Yuan Meridian anymore. I thought it would be faster than before. What he asked was what everyone else wanted to know too. Jian Fengqi sneered and waved his bone fan. Just watch. He didn't feel it before, but recently, he realized that other than the Tianjin Yuan Meridian, that had yet to recover, Chu Luiyue seemed to be better than before in all other aspects. This feeling was very subtle and hard to describe. This was because the current Chu Luiyue, whether it was the grade of her Yuan Meridian, or her personal strength, couldn't be compared to the previous Shanghai Yu at her peak. Most people felt that although she had returned, she was still a little worse than before. If it weren't for the fact that she had formed a contract with a mythical beast, received the recognition of the Tianling scepter, and even had Taizu's favor, she wouldn't have been able to sit on the throne for long. However, in Jian Fengqi's opinion, it was even more shocking that she had grown from a good-for-nothing with a damaged Yuan Meridian to her current level in just 1 or 2 years. These people were either familiar with Shanghai Yu or Chu Luiyue. He was the only one who had a deep understanding of her two identities. That was why he believed that she would definitely win today's battle. Chu Luiyue focused all her attention on the breakthrough. This made her ignore the passage of time. However, for the others who were waiting, it was a torment. Have you guys realized that the golden force seems to have decreased a lot compared to the beginning? It seems to have decreased by at least half. Other than the force that was devoured by Jun Jiuqing at the beginning, most of the remaining force has entered Shanghai Yu's body, right? Is she really going to take all the force for herself? I don't think it's that easy. Didn't you see that the divine force left behind by Taizu is still eyeing her covetously? Speaking of which, it originally belonged to the Dark North royal family. It's really inappropriate for her to snatch it away. You can't say that. The Dark North royal family invited everyone for the opening of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Since they dared to invite us, they should have made the necessary preparations. Rumble. An earth-shattering sound was heard as the third lightning tribulation struck down rapidly. Many people who were guarding the main peak felt the approaching pressure and had no choice but to retreat again. This time, the Dragon Abyss sword used up the last of its remaining force to barely block the lightning tribulation. Finally, the light dissipated, and the sword fell to the ground. If it weren't for the black shield and pure gold armor protecting her, Chu Luiyue's body would have been crushed by the spreading shockwaves. After being repeatedly attacked by the terrifying force, blood flowed from the corner of her mouth again. Taizu's voice carried a hint of anxiety. Girl, the Dragon Abyss sword can no longer fight. Are you still not ready? Chu Luiyue looked at the motionless water droplet in her dantian and slowly clenched her fists. If I don't break through, the fourth lightning tribulation will descend very soon. When that time comes, I'm afraid, if she didn't break through to level 7, the only outcome would be defeat. Rumble. As if to verify Taizu's words, the fourth lightning tribulation appeared in the clouds in the blink of an eye. Its force was obviously stronger than before. At this moment, a buzzing sound finally came from the water droplet. Chu Luiyue was delighted. However, just as the corners of her mouth curled up, she heard Taizu shout in shock. How could this be? Chu Luiyue sensed the abnormality and looked up. She saw dark clouds gathering in the sky, and a lightning tribulation was moving quickly like a silver snake. Beside it, another lightning tribulation was gathering. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 993. After the appearance of the fourth tribulation lightning, the fifth tribulation lightning followed closely behind. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Luiyue widened her eyes in shock and confusion. What's going on? Buzz. Another buzzing sound came from the water droplet. Ripples appeared on its surface, and the 6 lines on it started to tremble violently. In the sky, the fifth tribulation lightning seemed to be responding to it, and it quickly gathered. An ominous feeling surfaced in Chu Luiyue's heart. You can't be. Buzz. Another buzzing sound came from the water droplet, and another loud roar came from the clouds. Kaboom! Silver light flashed, And the sixth tribulation lightning also emerged from the dark clouds. Chu Liyue's pupils shrank, and her heart sank rapidly. She guessed correctly. This commotion was caused by the water droplet. It was actually provoking the tribulation lightning. After the shock, Chu Liyue's feelings were indescribable. She would never have thought that the one who brought her the greatest danger was not anyone else, but herself. The tribulation lightning was supposed to come one after another, and when she was ready, she could face it directly. How could so many tribulation lightning appear at once? Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched, and she gritted her teeth. You don't want me to die fast enough? The water droplet ignored Chu Liyue's question, and it continued to buzz. What followed was the continuous appearance of tribulations of lightning. The sixth, the seventh, the eighth. Almost in the blink of an eye, 5 tribulation lightning appeared in the sky. Taizu did not speak for a long time. When the 9th tribulation lightning gradually appeared, he finally could not help but speak. Girl, tell me honestly, what sin have you committed? Taizu's tone was serious and sincere, because he was asking this question sincerely. Other than this reason, he really couldn't figure out why Chu Liyue could summon so many lightning tribulations at once. One had to know that this was different from the ones summoned when forging divine artifacts. It was unknown how much stronger it would be. Earlier, with his help, they had barely managed to stop the 3 bolts of tribulation lightning. There were so many of them appearing at once. The entire ancient Phoenix Mountain would most likely be blasted into ruins. How could Chu Liyue's frail body withstand it? Chu Liyue was speechless at Taizu's question. She had long known that the water droplet had its own arrogance, and was definitely not obedient. Under most circumstances, it wouldn't cause any commotion. However, once they moved, they were not to be underestimated. This was also the main reason why Chu Liyue didn't use it often. Too much energy could easily cause trouble. Who would have thought that he would still fail this time? She only wanted to break through to become a rank 7 warrior, not be struck to death by these lightning tribulations in front of everyone. Facing Chu Liyue's question, it didn't seem to care much, and continued to devour the surrounding golden force quickly. At the same time, it let out a final buzzing sound. Chu Liyue closed her eyes and looked up in despair. The 9th lightning tribulation had almost completely gathered. This was 6 lightning tribulations. Long Yuan sword, Taizu, pure gold sacred armor. In front of these 6 lightning tribulations, all of them seemed so insignificant. Chu Liyue took a deep breath, and her mind spun wildly, trying to find a way to solve the current predicament. However, after thinking about it, she realized that she was wasting her brain power in vain. This situation was simply unsolvable. The onlookers were also stunned by this scene. It wasn't that they had never seen a cultivator trying to break through to rank 7, nor was it that they had never seen a god's tribulation. Those who could come here were all dragons and phoenixes among men. They were either top geniuses or peerless powerhouses. All of them were people of high status and tyrannical strength. What kind of storms and waves had these people not experienced? However, this scene really shocked them on the spot. God's tribulation. God's tribulation can actually have so many lightning tribulations at the same time. Gong Sun Zhao's face was pale. Her eyes widened as she stared at the scene on the main peak, and her lips trembled slightly. The God's tribulation had always appeared one by one, and once the cultivator succeeded in meeting it, the process would immediately stop. Several lightning tribulations appearing at the same time. This was unheard of. This is 6 lightning tribulations, plus the previous 3. This is 9 lightning tribulations. Ning Yuan had already stood up, and his eyes were fixed on everything that was happening with a solemn expression. Rumor has it that if one can summon the 7th god's tribulation, it means that one will definitely reach the peak of rank 9 in the future. If one can summon the 8th god's tribulation, they will be able to enter the god's realm. And now, Sheng Guanyu had summoned 9. What this meant was simply self-evident. At the same time, it was also shocking. Although Jun Qiji's expression was still calm, his fists were already clenched tightly. Back then, even the 9 ministers could only summon 8 lightning tribulations. Didn't this mean that Shang Guanyu's talent and potential in the future were even stronger than the 9 ministers? Tan Taichen's eyes were dull, and his body seemed to have been drained of energy. His limbs were weak, but his breathing was rapid. He took 2 steps back and barely managed to sit back down on the chair. But his heart was in a mess. 9 lightning tribulations. If she could really withstand it, impossible. Tan Taichen shook his head violently. Under 6 lightning tribulations, Shang Guanyu would definitely die. Between heaven and earth, there was only silence. Around the main peak of the ancient Phoenix Mountain, all the spectators looked at the lightning tribulations that almost lit up the dark sky, and all of them fell silent. Chu Luyue stared at the sky fixedly. The bright light almost blinded her eyes. She remembered that when she was Shang Guanyu, she had summoned 8 lightning tribulations. This time, there were 9 lightning tribulations. Moreover, they appeared almost at the same time. "Girl, what should we do?" Taizu asked in a low voice. If the girl was destined to face such a calamity, then even if he had to give up this strand of his soul and scatter it, he would still save her. Chu Luyue took a deep breath, and the corners of her lips curled up. "Of course, we'll do what we have to do. No matter what method we use, we just have to endure it." As soon as she finished her sentence, she heard an old and hoarse voice in her ears. "Ha, ignorant child, you're really naive." Chu Luyue's expression froze, and then her gaze turned sharp as she looked at the arrow not far away. Ever since she summoned the god's tribulation, it had stopped at the side and did not try to attack her. "Baiming Taizu?" Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes. Other than this person, there was no other choice. "You're indeed a rare genius, but unfortunately, you've come to the wrong place. This endless force was originally left by this old man for the Baiming bloodline. You should be punished for trying to snatch it. Now this god's tribulation is enough to take your life without this old man's help." Chu Luyue's lips curled into an extremely cold smile. "Is that so? Originally, I wasn't very interested in this thing, but since you said so, then I'll snatch this divine power of yours first." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 994. Chu Luyue waved her hand. A scarlet flame quickly appeared in her palm. Then she flicked her wrist. Smack! The sound of something breaking through the air resounded through the mountain. A crimson flaming whip flew out in an instant. It flew straight towards the arrow. "Ha! You don't know what's good for you." The Dark North Taizu sneered. With the 6 lightning tribulations above, Chu Luyue was facing a great disaster and could not even take care of herself. Under such circumstances, she still wanted to snatch the divine power that he had left behind? She was dreaming. Chi! The beautiful arrow quickly circled around and went straight for Chu Luyue from another direction. After being tortured by the first 3 lightning tribulations, the Long Yuan sword had almost exhausted all its energy and could not fight anymore. To the Dark North Taizu, this was undoubtedly a huge opportunity for him to attack. Originally, he had wanted to be a bystander and watch the lightning tribulations deal with her. He did not expect her to be so arrogant. Since that was the case, there was no harm in him attacking first to teach her a lesson. Smack! The long arrow that contained divine power was extremely fast, but Chu Luyue's red flame whip seemed to have grown eyes and quickly wrapped around it. Boom! The scorching flame burned wildly. You do have some tricks up your sleeves. Unfortunately, in front of divine power, these are nothing but cheap tricks. The old and hoarse voice was full of coldness. The next moment, the colorful flowing light on the arrow flew up rapidly. It transformed into countless flying knives and directly cut the surrounding space. One after another, black spatial cracks appeared in the air. The red flame whip was also directly cut apart. Swoosh! The arrow broke free and went straight for Chu Luyue again. A strong desire to fight flashed across Chu Luyue's eyes, and then she waved her other hand lightly. A transparent flame silently flew out of her palm like a stream of water. It transformed into a huge net in midair and directly spread in the direction of the arrow. "Do you think you can stop this old man by using the same method twice?" The Dark North Taizu was obviously disdainful of Chu Liyue's attack. The arrow did not slow down at all. Instead, it rushed over at an even faster speed. Several colorful light blades surrounded it, and they were extremely sharp. It looked like they were going to tear the huge net formed by the transparent flame in front of it. However, the moment the tip of the arrow made contact with it, the giant transparent net quickly spread out. It displayed an astonishing tension. This move not only did it avoid a fierce confrontation between the two sides, but it also caused the colorful light blades flying at the edge to lose their advantage. This time, it was as if he had punched cotton. He felt extremely aggrieved. "You're so young, but you're so cunning." The Dark North Taizu snorted coldly, and the aura of the arrow's aura instantly. The sound of the terrifying power grinding against space was especially ear-piercing. Several black spatial cracks appeared around the tip of the arrow, but the transparent flame was not torn apart. It was still intact, and it was still intact and was still. The Dark North Taizu then realized that something was wrong. This transparent flame, there was something fishy. However, by the time he realized this, it was already too late. The transparent flame net quickly shrank, trapping the arrow within. At the same time, the scarlet flame whip surged over again, covering the outside with another layer. A double-layered cage was instantly formed. The Dark North Taizu did not care about these two balls of flames before, but he soon realized that he could not break free from this cage. The beautiful and sharp arrow tried repeatedly, but it was blocked time and time again. At this moment, the Dark North Taizu realized that he had underestimated Chu Liyue's strength. "What is this?" His tone began to become flustered and exasperated, with a hint of mania. Chu Liyue slowly wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and sneered, but she did not explain. This scarlet flame was formed by the water droplets in her dantian. The transparent flame was the karmic fire that had been enshrined in the heavenly square cauldron for thousands of years. Its power was enough to suppress a divine beast, like the legendary three-eyed eagle, for thousands of years. It could even destroy its body and soul. These two were not ordinary items. Any one of them would be enough to make him suffer, let alone the two of them together. At the same time, Chu Liyue was still devouring the surrounding golden force. The endless force pouring down from the three essences, as one had almost been absorbed by Chu Liyue by 2/3. This speed was not slow, and when he thought about how she was only a rank 6 warrior, it was even more shocking. Jun Jiuqing's gaze was cold, and a faint blood color flickered in the depths of his pupils. That arrow contained a strand of Dark North Taizu's divine power. He could feel the hostility of Taizu towards Chu Liyue. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to attack earlier. At that time, he wanted to persuade him, but he did not expect that in the blink of an eye, the situation would become like this. The one who had the upper hand was actually Chu Liyue? Her two flames were not ordinary. Otherwise it would be impossible for them to trap the divine power. Seeing that the flames were burning fiercely, the originally brilliant light on the arrow gradually dimmed. Jun Jiuqing felt a rare sense of uneasiness in his heart. He mobilized the force in his body, and his robes fluttered. Then he suddenly raised his hand, and an icy green chain was thrown out from his sleeve. It broke through the air. Green jade bone chain. The chain was faintly cold. At first glance, it looked like it was carved out of high-quality green jade, and it seemed very fragile. But wherever it passed, the void collapsed directly. It was enough to show the power of this chain. In the blink of an eye, the chain flew in front of the ball of flames. Poof! The two forces collided, one cold and one hot. The moment they touched, there was an ear-piercing burning sound. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes, and the power in his hand increased again. The cold air on the green jade bone chain instantly surged. It pierced straight forward. The arrow sensed Jun Jiuqing's power, and instantly charged forward. The internal and external forces overlapped, and a hole was finally torn in the boundary formed by the two layers of flames. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the green jade bone chain quickly wrapped around the arrow. Return! Jun Jiuqing retracted his wrist, and took the opportunity to bring the arrow back. Chu Liyue seemed to have suffered a backlash from this force. Her body shook, and she spat out another mouthful of blood. Jun Jiuqing's gaze turned slightly, and his gaze paused on her pale face for a moment, and his brows furrowed slightly. Hey, you really treat her differently. An old and hoarse voice entered his ears. Jun Jiuqing's pupil shrank, and he looked at the arrow. Taizu, you misunderstood. Kid, who do you think I am doing this for? Dark North Taizu interrupted him and sneered. The endless force that ancient Phoenix Mountain has accumulated for 1,000 years, and this remaining divine power, is all for the descendants of my Dark North royal family to step into the god realm. But you are so willing to give it up, you really disappoint me. Jun Jiuqing's eyes darkened. Just as he was about to explain, he saw the arrow suddenly change direction and went straight for Chu Luyue. She seemed to have sensed something, and she turned around. Then a trace of shock flashed in her eyes. She immediately raised her hand to stop it, but it was already too late. Chi! The gorgeous arrow pierced Chu Luyue's chest. Chapter 995. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. The warm, sweet, and fishy blood splattered on her face, making her look even more pitiful. Chu Luyue grabbed the tail of the arrow almost as soon as it pierced her body. However, the arrow had already pierced her chest, and was only half an inch away from her heart. Dark red blood gushed out from the wound. As she was wearing a red shirt, the blood gushing out was very inconspicuous. In addition, she had been constantly devouring the force, and had left many wounds and bloodstains on her body. It was even more difficult to identify the arrow now. However, that dazzling arrow was so clear that everyone could see it clearly as it flickered with a dazzling light. Luyu, Your Majesty, Yuan Jinghong, and the others saw this scene and exclaimed in unison. Mu Hongyu was about to rush over on impulse, but Jian Fengqi pulled her back. What are you doing? Saving Luyu. Mu Hongyu was extremely anxious and tried to pry his hand away. Why are you pulling me back? It'll be too late if you don't go now. You're still injured. Are you going to throw your life away? The usual carefree smile on Jian Fengqi's face disappeared and was replaced by a cold expression. In her current state, she wouldn't be of any help even if she went over. Mu Hongyu was so anxious that her eyes turned red. How do you know I can't do it? She has the faint Yuan body. I just need to go over and bring Luyu back first. Jian Fengqi grabbed her hand and pinned her to the side. He looked up and met her red almond eyes. His harsh words were stuck in his throat. He paused for a moment and the cold aura around him gradually calmed down. That arrow wasn't enough to kill her. How did you? If she didn't want to, that arrow wouldn't have had a chance to succeed. Jian Fengqi quickly explained. But Mu Hongyu and the others were instantly stunned. You mean? Mu Hongyu suddenly thought of something. She turned around and looked at Chu Luyue without blinking. Did she do it on purpose? Because it was too unbelievable. Mu Hongyu's voice was very soft, almost inaudible. But at least it was much more stable than before. Jian Fengqi heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He also raised his eyes and looked over. There was a complicated look in his icy peach blossom eyes. He was definitely one of the people who knew Shengguan Yu the best in the world. Especially when she was fighting. After suffering so many losses, it wasn't for nothing. Mu Hongyu gritted her teeth and calmed down a lot. Jun Jiuqing was extremely powerful. If she went there alone, it would be extremely difficult for her to bring Chu Luyue back safely. Not to mention that she was still injured. Right now, she could only rely on herself. Yuan Jinghong looked at Jian Fengqi strangely. Just now, why was he so nervous about Mu Hongyu? He almost never showed such a cold expression to a woman. At that moment, could it be that he was really anxious? As if sensing his gaze, Jian Fengqi's expression changed slightly, and he glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. There was an undisguised warning in his eyes. Yuan Jinghong immediately stretched out his hand obediently and pulled his mouth. Only then did Jian Fengqi retract his gaze in satisfaction. He slightly loosened his grip on Mu Hongyu's hand, but he didn't completely let go. He just held it like that. Taizu. When the arrow suddenly flew back, Jun Jiuqing knew that something was wrong and immediately wanted to stop it. Unfortunately, he was a step too late. In the blink of an eye, the arrow had already pierced Chu Liyue's chest. Seeing blood gushing out of her chest, Jun Jiuqing's eyes were instantly drowned in blood. A bone-chilling coldness spread out from his body. The surrounding air seemed to have frozen. Madness, biting cold, fury. However, this emotion only lasted for a moment. Because in the next moment, he saw a ball of flame burning in Chu Liyue's hand that was holding the arrow's tail. The arrow was once again surrounded by flames. Only this time, the power of the flames seemed to be much stronger than before. In the blink of an eye, the color on the arrow quickly faded. Jun Jiuqing only heard Taizu's hurried shout, and the rest came to an abrupt end. As if sensing his gaze, Chu Liyue looked up. The corners of her blood-stained lips curled up slightly, and a sly and presumptuous smile appeared. Jun Jiuqing instantly understood. The blood in his eyes quickly faded, like the waves that were quickly calming down. When he looked again, all that was left was a calm and deep river. It was as if that moment of losing control was just an illusion. He adjusted his expression too quickly, so much so that no one noticed the change in his expression. "You did that on purpose?" Jun Jiuqing spoke slowly. Although it was a question, his tone was affirmative. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows and her smile deepened. "Ah, it seems that my acting skills are not good enough. But it's fine as long as it's enough, don't you think?" She admitted it. Jun Jiuqing's expression was cold. When he attacked just now, Chu Liyue purposely pretended to be weak and released the arrow. She knew that Taizu had long wanted to kill her, and would definitely not let it go, so she deliberately let it go at this time. What she was waiting for was Taizu's counterattack. It's useless even if you snatch this divine power. If you can't eliminate Taizu's consciousness, then this divine power will never belong to you. Jun Jiuqing raised his hand. "Return it to I. In exchange, I can help you. Thank you for your good intentions, but there's no need." Chu Liyue smiled brightly, and immediately pulled out the arrow. 2 balls of flames quickly spread from her palms, and completely surrounded it. Then its figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly, and his aura was faintly discernible. "What do you want to do?" "It's not what I want to do, but what you're forcing me to do." As Chu Liyue spoke, she used the flames to set up a translucent barrier around them. At the same time, the arrow in Chu Liyue's dantian was quickly swallowed by the heavenly square cauldron. Sensing the heavy pressure coming from all directions, the Dark North Taizu finally realized that something was wrong and frantically tried to rush out. However, the heavenly square cauldron could even suppress the three-eyed eagle at its peak, let alone this incomplete divine power. No matter how the arrow struggled inside, the heavenly square cauldron did not move. What is this?" The Dark North Taizu's voice had a hint of panic. How could a mere stage 6 warrior suppress his divine power? Chu Liyue's mind moved, and the transparent karmic fire began to burn wildly. A short and hurried shout was heard, and immediately, the arrow began to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. "This divine power, I'll take it." Chapter 996. Soon, within the heavenly square cauldron, the arrow transformed into a ball of light the size of a fist. Its entire body was colorful and extremely magnificent, and the divine power that was slowly emanating from it was enough to make one's heart tremble in fear. However, within the heavenly square cauldron, its little bit of power did not seem to have any deterrence. In addition to the crazily burning transparent karmic fire, there were also two Tian babies floating inside. One of them was slowly approaching the ball of divine power. When the two were extremely close to each other, the ball of light seemed to feel some kind of threat. Even the light on top of it dimmed a lot. With the Tian baby watching over it, the ball of divine power finally became much more obedient. "Refine his remaining consciousness," said Yifutian. Chu Liyue instructed in her heart. As soon as she finished speaking, more flames instantly surged out of the heavenly square cauldron. The temperature also seemed to be much higher than before. The ball of light seemed to have sensed danger, and was ready to move. It rushed upwards again. Swoosh! The Tian babies suddenly flew up quickly, and directly passed through the middle of the ball of light. Poochie! With a sound, the ball of light was instantly dispersed. When the ball of light gathered together again, it was smaller than before, but it looked more pure and clean. The two Tian babies seemed to have fallen in love with this game, and began to happily shuttle back and forth in the ball of light. Every time, it would make the ball of divine power purer. As for the remnant consciousness of the Dark North Great Ancestor, it was gradually dissipating under the repeated attacks. This made Chu Luiyue heave a sigh of relief. She turned her attention back to the golden force around her. At this time, she had almost devoured 4/5 of it. Of course, at the cost of this, her body was already covered in wounds and blood. Everything happened too quickly. Just when the crowd thought that Chu Luiyue would be crippled, even if she didn't die this time, they saw her directly pull out the arrow. Then the arrow disappeared, but Chu Luiyue was still fine. The speed at which she devours the force seems to have increased. Someone suddenly shouted, full of shock and disbelief. Everyone looked over. The golden origin power that filled the sky had indeed dissipated quite a bit compared to before. Without a doubt, they had all been devoured by Chu Luiyue. Logically speaking, her body shouldn't have been able to withstand so much origin power, and should have exploded long ago. But no. Jun Jiuqing cursed inwardly. Although he didn't intend to kill Chu Luiyue, this divine power still contained Taizu's consciousness. If it was taken away, he frowned and was about to attack. However, right at this moment, a loud bang suddenly resounded from the sky. Boom! He suddenly looked up and saw the 6 bolts of tribulation lightning swimming crazily in the clouds, about to strike down. Crack! A crack suddenly appeared on the ground beneath his feet. Jun Jiuqing's pupil shrank. The main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain was where Taizu had broken through, so it had always been very hard. Previously, it had experienced many impacts, but it was still intact. Now that it suddenly cracked, it must be that the divine power had begun to be devoured by Chu Luiyue. With a thought, the cracks spread rapidly on the mountaintop. In the blink of an eye, it was like a spider web. Chu Luiyue looked up and glanced at it. She didn't have much time left. A trace of madness flashed in her eyes. Immediately, she closed her eyes and the aura around her suddenly erupted. The golden origin power around her suddenly sped up and surged into her body. Poof! Because the sudden surge of energy was too much, a bloody wound appeared on Chu Luiyue's wrist. However, this was just the beginning. Soon the same thing happened all over her body. Previously, she had some external injuries caused by similar reasons, so she bled so much. However, those were still under her control. She knew the limit of her endurance, so she could control it well. However, at this moment, she couldn't care less. The remaining golden origin power, which was close to 1/5, rushed into Chu Luiyue's body at an unimaginable speed. Bang! A crisp sound could be heard coming from his body. That was the sound of the Yuan Meridian exploding, because it couldn't withstand the terrifying energy. Girl, you're crazy! Taizu suddenly shouted. If the physical body was damaged, it could be recuperated and adjusted. However, if the Yuan Meridian was broken, the impact would be great. Moreover, at this juncture, the Yuan Meridian was extremely important. She was cutting off her own path. Because of the intense pain, Chu Luiyue's eyes were already scarlet red. Only the trace of determination in the depths of her eyes let others know that this was indeed her decision. I'm not crazy. Chu Luiyue's voice was very soft, but it was filled with deep persistence. This is my only way. The lightning tribulation was about to descend. She had to immediately break through to become a rank 7 warrior. As she spoke, she absorbed all the surrounding golden origin power. At the same time, she also absorbed the ball of divine power that had shrunk to the size of a longan in the heavenly square cauldron. All the energy rushed into the small water droplet floating in her dantian. Bang! 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 The surging power was like a surging river, gushing down in an instant. The Yuan Meridian in Chu Luiyue's body also exploded one after another. Her vision turned black. The clothes on her body were tattered, and there were bloody wounds everywhere. She was completely covered in blood. The last golden star disappeared. All the brilliant light quickly dimmed. Between heaven and earth it was dark. Only the lightning tribulation in the clouds lit up half the sky. It flickered and swam quickly. It was wrapped in a shocking pressure, as if it was ready to descend and destroy the world at any time. She actually forcefully swallowed all this energy, all of it. Look! She seems to be bleeding. She's crazy. She's really seeking her own death. At this moment, everyone could finally see the situation at the top of the mountain. The girl in red sat quietly. There was a black shield in front of her, and a dragon abyss sword lying beside her. Her black hair hung down. It was silent. However, around her and under her feet, the color of blood continued to spread. Looking at this situation, one would almost think that she was dead at first glance. Chu Liyue's eyes were tightly shut. The water droplet in her dantian spun quickly. It swallowed all the origin power, and that ball of divine power, and converted them into its own energy. The yuan meridian in Chu Liyue's body was still shattering. Under the impact of this terrifying energy, the lustrous and tough yuan meridian broke one after another. However, Chu Liyue could no longer care about that at this moment. She used all her strength to gather all this energy. Then she charged toward the water droplet. Whoosh! It was like waves crashing heavily on a reef. Countless waves were created. A few patterns on the water droplet also started to vibrate violently. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the lightning tribulation in the sky finally descended. Chu Liyue's figure was instantly enveloped by it. Chapter 997. 6 lightning tribulations struck down at the same time. It was a powerful attack. It was terrifying. The moment the dazzling light engulfed Chu Liyue, a loud sound came from the main peak. Then, under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the towering and precipitous main peak was suddenly split apart from the middle. Half of the cliff collapsed instantly. Rumble. The sound was deafening, and dust rose everywhere. Retreat. The people who had been standing nearby quickly retreated. The power of the 6 lightning tribulations was immeasurable, and ordinary people could not resist at all. The only way out was to retreat. Jun Jiuqing wanted to make a move, but he was one step too late. The lightning tribulations descended, and a powerful force came crashing down. He felt a tightness in his chest, and then he saw the cracks on the top of the mountain spreading rapidly. The moment the cliff collapsed, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and quickly flew up. Just as he was about to move forward, the terrifying force of the lightning tribulations swept over him. His pupils shrank, and he immediately retreated. Although he was extremely fast, he was still affected by the force. His body shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. After flying for a long distance, he barely managed to stabilize himself. He immediately looked up and saw that the remaining half of the mountain had been completely enveloped by several silver lightning tribulations. The slender and straight figure had completely disappeared and could not be seen. Jiuqing! Suddenly a shout could be heard. Jun Jiuqing's expression changed. This voice, it was his father's voice. He suddenly turned around and saw that outside the barrier in the distance, Jun Qiji was floating in midair with a stern expression. The lightning tribulations have descended. Take everyone away from the ancient Phoenix Mountain immediately. Seal the barrier. Jun Qiji did not make this decision willfully. In fact, when he saw the 6 lightning tribulations appear at the same time, he already had a faint sense of uneasiness in his heart. But at that time, he still held on to the last bit of hope. He thought that it would not be too late to think about this after Jun Jiuqing took back the endless force and divine power. But who would have thought that Shang Guanyu would be so crazy and directly devour all the power? Such an action could be called crazy. She wanted to die. But Jun Qiji did not want her to drag everyone else down with her. Therefore, when he saw that the lightning tribulation had arrived and was already wreaking havoc, Jun Qiji made a prompt decision and immediately summoned Jun Jiuqing and the others to leave the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Upon hearing this order, Jun Jiuqing subconsciously frowned and was about to refuse. Father, it doesn't seem right to leave ancient Phoenix Mountain right now. Boom! Boom! Before he could finish his sentence, the aftershocks of the lightning tribulation swept out in all directions. The peaks of the surrounding mountains were all shaved off. The mountain also collapsed. Countless rocks tumbled down. Amidst the chaos, there were some screams. Obviously, the power of these lightning tribulations had already spread out. Even those who had already begun to evacuate were more or less affected. It was a mess. Junchiji glanced at him and said coldly, "You've already caused such a ruckus, yet you're still not evacuating? Are you planning to have everyone stay here forever?" Jun Jiuqing was a stage 9 warrior, so he might be able to hold on for a while longer. However, the others here did not have the strength to do so. If they stayed any longer, they would only be in greater danger. That's right. The energy in ancient Phoenix Mountain is chaotic now. We can't stay any longer. Gongsun Shao also flew up and stood beside Junchiji, his face tense. He did not want the people from his dynasty to die here for no reason. With the arrival of 3 elements as one, the endless force and divine power were all occupied by Sheng Guanyu. What was the point of the others staying here? They could only be forced to go through this tribulation together. Junchiji put his hands behind his back and looked at Jun Jiuqing with a dark expression. 9 ministers, other than you, the top geniuses from the other dynasties are still inside. If anything happens to them, can you bear the responsibility? Even if the Dark North dynasty had the highest status here, they could not bear such a heavy responsibility. This was the only and best way to deal with the current situation. Jun Jiuqing slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. His eyes were filled with bitterness. If he left now, she would be the only one left. 9 ministers, why are you still hesitating? Junchiji stared at him, as if he had seen through everything. There was a hint of coldness and warning in his eyes. Don't forget your identity. Previously, he had vaguely guessed that the 9 ministers might have some feelings for Sheng Guanyu. However, from the looks of it now, these thoughts were much deeper than what he had expected. This made Junchiji vigilant. Jun Jiuqing was Prince Baiming, and the only future emperor of Dark North dynasty. It was fine for him to like a woman, but if this love exceeded a certain limit, it would not be good. In the beginning, Jun Jiuqing could have taken action directly and not given Sheng Guanyu any chance. However, he did not do so. Instead, he indulged in Sheng Guanyu step by step and allowed it to reach its current state. The endless force that Taizu had deliberately left behind and accumulated for thousands of years, as well as the vital divine power, should have been his. But now it was all taken away by another person. This made Junchiji very uneasy. He looked around and could no longer see the figure on the damaged main peak. Perhaps her death would be the best ending for her. At this moment, a figure rushed over. It was Qing Dai. She was clearly injured and covered in blood. She bit her lips and bowed to Jun Jiuqing from afar. Your Highness, many people below can't hold on any longer. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes and lowered his gaze as he quickly scanned the area. In fact, even if Qing Dai did not say this, he could roughly guess the situation. The power contained within the lightning tribulation was simply too terrifying. Not only did it affect the main peak, but even the surrounding peaks were affected as well. However, by standing out like this, she was undoubtedly giving him another push. As expected, Junchiji urged again. Jiuqing. Needless to say, this cold voice that was filled with warning had already explained everything. Jun Jiuqing looked at Qing Dai meaningfully. Qing Dai suddenly felt guilty and hurriedly lowered her head, not daring to look at him again. The look in His Highness' eyes just now. She had never seen His Highness look at her like that before. Qing Dai's heart was filled with anxiety, fear, and a trace of unwillingness. His Majesty and the others had already requested to evacuate. Naturally, they had to act immediately. Could it be that so many people were going to die together because of Sheng Guanyu? I understand. After a short stalemate, Jun Jiuqing finally spoke. Everyone leave ancient Phoenix Mountain immediately. In 15 minutes, the barrier of ancient Phoenix Mountain will be officially closed. His hoarse and low voice quickly reached everyone's ears. Then he waved his sleeve, and a long green bridge appeared in midair. The end of the long bridge was connected to the exit of the barrier. Soon, figures appeared from all over the place. They jumped onto the long bridge and headed straight for the exit. Chapter 998. Facing such a dangerous situation. How could they care about anything else? They had to leave this place first and protect their own lives first. Therefore, everyone inside the ancient Phoenix Mountains barrier left quickly without any hesitation. The elders guarding the barrier outside had clearly realized that something was wrong and tried their best to tear a hole in the barrier. Perhaps because of the chaos inside, the colorful barrier's power seemed to have been reduced by a lot. This undoubtedly made the elders feel much more relaxed. However, no one dared to relax in such a situation. Who knew how terrifying the power of the lightning tribulation was? After all, no one had seen anyone summon the ninth soul-gazing tribulation. Moreover, it was 6 at once. Elder Hua Qian looked at the violent power of the lightning tribulation and the collapsing mountain with a grave expression. Ancient Phoenix Mountain, I'm afraid it's going to be destroyed. Elder Chen Ku and the others didn't care at all whether the ancient Phoenix Mountain would be destroyed or not. What they cared about was the safety of Chu Luiyue and the others. Jian Fengqi and the others might still have a chance to return, but Her Majesty, she was now completely enveloped by the power of the lightning tribulation, so I'll go in and bring her back. Elder Su Jin couldn't hold back and was about to move out. However, just as she reached the opening of the barrier and was about to enter, a violent power surged out from within. Elder Su Jin was caught off guard and was pushed back a few steps. Xiao Ran immediately went forward and supported her with a worried expression. Ah Jin, are you alright? Elder Su Jin didn't care about that and pointed inside. You are still inside. What should they do? Xiao Ran pursed his lips. You're a mystic cultivator, so you'll be at a disadvantage if you go in. It's better for you to stay here. I'm a martial artist, so it's better for me to go. With that he moved and was about to go in. No one needs to go. Cindy suddenly spoke. Everyone looked at him and saw that his expression was still calm, without any hint of nervousness. This is her soul-gazing tribulation, so she can only go through it herself. No one else can help her. Sun Yi's words weren't without reason. Even if other people went over and helped her block some of the power, she still had to win this round. Then, are we just going to watch and do nothing? Elder Su Jin paced back and forth anxiously. If she was at her peak in the past, she might have been able to survive. But now, on one hand, Chu Luiyue was only at the peak of the 6th stage. On the other hand, she had already been badly injured by the boundless origin power and divine power. Under such circumstances, facing 6 lightning tribulations was simply a one-way trip. Cindy looked up and narrowed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he said, as long as she can break through to the 7th rank, it might not be impossible. More and more people left. In the end, only Mu Hongyu and the others remained where they were. What should we do? Lu Yu hasn't made any moves yet. Mu Hongyu's heart was in her throat, and she felt uneasy. If not for the fact that Dumpling was still by their side, she would have really thought that something had happened to Chu Luiyue. Even so, they still couldn't completely eliminate their worries. That kind of power, even Jun Jiuqing couldn't withstand it, let alone her? The few of them were conflicted. They all looked at Jian Fengqi, waiting for him to make a decision. How could Jian Fengqi not be hesitant? If they didn't wait, they wouldn't be able to get over it. If they weren't careful, they would have to die here. Boom! A silver lightning tribulation struck. The mountain peak they were on also began to collapse. Screech! Dumpling suddenly let out a clear cry. She was urging them to leave. Jian Fengqi knitted his brows and turned around to look. Chu Luiyue's figure was still nowhere to be seen. He gritted his teeth. Let's go. Mu Hongyu originally didn't agree, but she was worried that she would be a burden to Chu Luiyue if she stayed here. Seeing that Dumpling had already made up her mind to send them out, she took a few deep breaths and finally jumped onto Dumpling's back. The few of them followed one after another. Dumpling's wings flapped and she quickly flew up towards the exit. Mu Hongyu looked back reluctantly. Jian Fengqi also followed her gaze. He lowered his eyes and saw that her fists were clenched so tightly that her knuckles were white. His heart skipped a beat. He held her hand. "Don't worry. Since Dumpling wants to take us away, it means that she's definitely fine." Mu Hongyu nodded vigorously. The group quickly flew out. Jun Jiuqing followed closely behind and was the last to leave. Elder Hua Qian gave the order. Ancient Phoenix Mountain Pass. The gorgeous colorful barrier closed with a bang. Except for Chu Luyue. Everyone had already come out. Most of them were injured. At this time, they looked at the half of the cliff that was barely standing with lingering fear. Tan Taichen looked around, and his heart gradually sank. Nothing. Not a single person. As expected, the 5 people from Taiyu dynasty were all dead. The blood in his body seemed to have frozen. His whole body was cold, and his mind was blank. Even if he had expected it, the moment he personally verified it, he still staggered and almost fell. He slowly raised his head and looked at the dazzling light. Shang Guanyu. She deserved to die. After this battle, her soul would definitely scatter. Although he couldn't take revenge personally, it was still a consolation to get this result. However, at this moment, there was a sudden exclamation from the crowd. "What's that?" Tan Taichen's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly looked over. He saw a slender and straight figure suddenly appear in the dazzling light. It was Chu Luyue. She broke through to the 7th rank. A digression. I thank you for Lizzie's new cover. It's so big. Chapter 999. The lightning tribulation shone brightly, almost illuminating half of the sky. On the steep mountain peak, the woman stood with her head held high, her clothes fluttering in the wind. There was a palm-sized golden peach blossom above her head. The terrifying power of the lightning tribulation poured down, but when it met the golden peach blossom, it seemed to be afraid and flowed to the side. With it as the center, Chu Luyue held up a small sky. "What is that?" Jun Qiji and the others were shocked when they saw this scene. What kind of power could make the lightning tribulation feel fear? Yet, such a small golden peach blossom was able to easily block all of the pressure from the outside. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes dangerously, and a faint trace of disgust appeared in his eyes. "It's really haunting me." Chu Luyue looked up and stared at the golden peach blossom. When the 6 lightning tribulations fell together, she was at the critical moment of breaking through to become a rank 7 warrior. Thanks to this thing, it helped her block it for a moment, and she won the last bit of time to successfully break through. That familiar feeling grew stronger and stronger, and something seemed to be about to come out from the bottom of her heart. Chu Luyue stood quietly on the spot, but an earth-shattering change was happening in her body. The invisible barrier had already shattered, and in her dantian, a turbulent force swept through. On the water droplet, the 7th pattern was slowly emerging. What was different from the previous 6 lines was that the color of this line was gorgeous and incomparably bright. The moment Chu Luyue saw it, she instantly held her breath. This was the trace left behind by devouring the divine power of Taizu of the northern underworld. Even in her previous life, she had not reached such a stage. To step into the rank 7 warrior with the help of a divine power. When the gorgeous pattern was officially outlined, a drop of water suddenly flew out from the water droplet. That drop of water was suffused with colorful phosphorescence, and it was very moving. Then, it transformed into thousands of tiny water droplets and flew towards Chu Luyue's limbs and bones. After being washed by the terrifying power, the Yuan meridian in Chu Luyue's body was severely damaged, and it was like dry and chapped ground, covered in ravines. When those water droplets flew over, it was as if spring had returned to the earth. Chu Luyue's damaged Yuan meridian began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Furthermore, his Yuan meridian was clearly wider, tougher, and more lustrous than before. Chu Luyue's heart suddenly trembled violently when he saw the faint glow on the newly repaired Yuan meridian. Then, under her incredulous gaze, these water droplets scattered and rapidly repaired all the Yuan meridians in her body. Chu Luyue's aura rose again. The pressure was overwhelming. That was the unique aura of the Tianjin Yuan Meridian. At the same time, Chu Liyue's broken Yuan Meridian was not only repaired by the power of the water droplet, but it was also directly transformed into the Tianjin Yuan Meridian. In an instant, his entire body felt relaxed, as if the mountains were high and the rivers were wide. Vigorous origin power surged out of his dantian and poured into his Yuan Meridian that had expanded by several times. It was incomparably smooth. Chu Liyue felt as if something was stirring in his chest. This feeling was something that he had not felt for a long time. She had never thought that she would have the chance to regain the Tianjin Yuan Meridian in this life. She subconsciously reached out her hand, but the moment the golden peach blossom touched her hand, it quietly dissipated. At the same time, the black pyramid in her dantian suddenly moved. Immediately, a crack clearly appeared on top of it. Faint light shone from within, as if thousands of worlds were hidden within. That familiar feeling became even more intense. At this moment, Chu Liyue was almost certain that what was hidden inside was indeed her soul. This time, the crack on the black pyramid was not repaired, but it did not continue to expand either. Chu Liyue could feel a familiar aura inside, but she was unable to summon it out. She was very clear that as long as this black pyramid was completely opened, and she found the soul that belonged to her, then the lost memory would definitely return. She was only one step away from the truth, but this step was no different from a huge chasm that was difficult to cross. Rumble. Just as Chu Liyue was thinking about this black pyramid, the numerous lightning tribulations above her head made a loud noise again and struck towards her. Without the protection of the golden peach blossom, Chu Liyue would have to face this extremely terrifying pressure directly. The next moment, with a thought, the long yuan sword quickly flew back to her hand. Everyone turned to look at him. The world was dark, and the surrounding mountains had been razed to the ground. It was a complete mess. Only the main peak still stood upright with half of the steep cliff. The woman in red had a slender figure, but she stood straight. Her shoulders were thin and weak, but they seemed to be able to hold up the sky. The wind was raging, and her hair was fluttering. Swoosh! She tiptoed, and her body flew up instantly like a sharp arrow. She was actually going to face the numerous lightning tribulations head-on. Seeing this scene, everyone outside the boundary was dumbfounded. She actually chose to face it head-on. What exactly is she thinking? Even if she has broken through to become a stage 7 warrior, facing 6 lightning tribulations, she will definitely lose. Oh my god. How did she successfully break through in that situation just now? I don't dare to say anything else, but Shang Guanyu's ability and luck are really incomparable to ordinary people. The crowd discussed spiritedly. They all felt that the things that had happened to that woman during this period of time were simply too bizarre. First, she split open the ancient Phoenix Mountains boundary alone. Then, she went against the flow and climbed to the top of the main peak. After that, she directly snatched the endless force and divine power that originally belonged to Jun Jiuqing. Just when everyone thought that she would definitely die after summoning 9 divinity tribulations, she actually successfully broke through to become a stage 7 warrior under such circumstances. And now she was going to fight against the 6 lightning tribulations. Any one of these things was enough to shake people's hearts, and she actually did all of them. At this moment, Chu Liyue had no other thoughts. In her eyes and heart, there was only one goal: to win this divinity tribulation. 1 tribulation was a tribulation, 6 tribulations was also a tribulation. Since they appeared together then, she would just solve them together. The sharp and cold aura kept attacking her, and she felt a sharp pain on her face and body. However, this little bit of pain was nothing to Chu Liyue. She mobilized the force in her body. It was continuously injected into the long yuan sword. On the simple and imposing black sword body, the aura rose crazily. The groove in the middle was also filled with the silver Tianlei's power. Chu Liyue's mind moved, and ripples appeared on the water droplet. Magnificent ripples spread out in all directions. Buzz! The sword hummed. Chu Liyue slashed down. In an instant, the world lost its color. Break for me. Chapter 1000. Boom. The two forces collided with each other. Following the deafening sound, a violent and terrifying energy wave began to spread in all directions. It was unstoppable. The mountain range that had already been ravaged beyond recognition was completely flattened by this force. The hard mountain rocks silently turned into powder and scattered in the air. The ground cracked and was filled with ravines. Whoosh! Several lightning tribulations converged and formed a large silver ball of light. Suddenly, a hole was torn open. Then, everyone saw a figure rising up against the sky. She was extremely fast and slashed with her sword. In the blink of an eye, everyone realized that the hole had spread rapidly. She had actually cut the lightning tribulations in half. She had carved out a bloody path. The intense energy battle left countless wounds on Chu Liyue's body. Blood kept dripping from her body, but she didn't care about it. The crackling power of the lightning tribulations rapidly approached from all directions. Following that opening, it formed a ring shape and surrounded Chu Liyue in the middle. Chu Liyue surveyed her surroundings, and her lips curved up into a cold smile. You want to besiege me? That depends on whether I'm willing or not. She shook her arm, and two flames instantly surged out from her palms. One was red, and the other was transparent. The two flames intertwined and quickly enveloped the long yuan sword. Several lightning tribulations closed in. Chu Liyue's eyes flashed with a crazy desire to fight. Just in time. Before she finished speaking, she had already attacked. The incomparably sharp blade pierced through the approaching lightning tribulation energy. Everywhere it passed, flames began to burn wildly. The lightning tribulations that were arrogant before seemed to have sensed danger and began to fight fiercely. However, the more they fought, the fiercer the flames burned and burned them all to ashes. Shangguanyu's flames can actually fight against the lightning tribulations? Gongsun Xiao, who was far away, was shocked. No, her flames clearly devoured all the energy. Ning Yuan had also appeared in midair. He looked ahead and spoke in a low voice. Deep in his eyes, which had always been calm, there seemed to be a storm brewing. When he saw that Shangguanyu had successfully broken through to become a stage 7 warrior under such circumstances, he had already predicted that she would win this battle. However, he didn't expect Shangguanyu's combat power to be even more shocking than he had expected. This was her real trump card. The surrounding people were all stunned and speechless. Everything that had happened before their eyes had already exceeded their knowledge. Every scene was like a miracle. The next moment, Chu Liyue turned her waist, and the long yuan sword, which was wrapped in a terrifying fire, had already ignited all the lightning around her. Boom! The flames burned fiercely, a sea of fire tribulations. Several bolts of tribulation lightning were quickly devoured. Not long after, there was only a sea of fire that was still burning fiercely in the sky. In the next moment, a figure. Everything in the world seemed to have lost its color at this moment. Only the woman in the red dress with her black hair dancing in the wind, and the black sword in her hand, was like a god of war descending. She was like a god of death. She was covered in wounds, and her face was covered in blood. However, her eyes were cold and resolute. Her black jade-like eyes seemed to have gathered all the light in the world. They were dazzling. They were more precious than the treasures in the world. Under the brilliant light of the fire, it was as if she had been reborn. Her figure moved and landed lightly on the ground. The moment her feet touched the top of the main peak, boom! The mountain collapsed. The last remaining half of the cliff was also completely destroyed. She still stood there, unmoving like a mountain. With a flick of her wrist, the flames behind her rushed back into her body. Then she raised her eyes and looked over. They were clearly far away, and there was clearly a barrier blocking them. However, Jun Qiji and the others were shocked. This aura, this pressure. Was she really just a stage 7 warrior? Chu Liyue raised her hand and slashed down with her sword. Qi. The ancient Phoenix Mountains barrier was instantly torn apart. Chu Liyue's figure moved and she quickly flew out. Until Chu Liyue stepped out of the barrier, no one had realized what had happened. Looking at the woman who seemed to have appeared in front of them in the blink of an eye, countless people widened their eyes in shock, their faces filled with disbelief. In the dead silence, Sini took the lead and walked over. He sized up Chu Luiyue without batting an eyelid. Then, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. His usually indifferent eyes were filled with undisguised gratification and joy. He placed one hand on his left chest and bowed slightly. "Welcome back, Your Majesty." Chu Luiyue also smiled. Xingyi's eyesight had always been good. He must have seen that she had recovered her Tianjing Yuan meridian. After her rebirth, her only regret was that she had lost her Tianjing Yuan meridian. And now, this regret had finally been made up for. Everything could be considered perfect. Elder Chen Ku and the others finally came back to their senses. They could not hide their excitement. Not only did she come out alive, but she had also successfully broken through and become a stage 7 warrior. More importantly, she had withstood 9 lightning tribulations. Her future was bound to be limitless. Mu Hongyu and the others also rushed over. If not for her last bit of rationality, Mu Hongyu would have pounced over. Lu Yu, you're so amazing. I knew you would succeed." Although her face was filled with ecstasy, the corners of her eyes were red. It was obvious that she had cried. Chu Luiyue comforted her with a smile. "Don't worry. Aren't I fine now?" How was it just fine? It was a huge gain. Everyone was originally filled with lofty aspirations, wanting to compete for supremacy within the ancient Phoenix Mountain. But in the end, the biggest winner was Chu Luiyue, who had no intention of entering at all. Who wouldn't be envious? Jian Fengqi opened his bone fan and raised his brows. "You're really tough." Although he said that, there was a smile at the corners of his eyes. It could be seen that he was truly happy for Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue readily accepted his advice. "Thank you for the compliment." Jian Fengqi finally couldn't help but laugh. She had changed her physical body, but her temperament hadn't changed at all. In short, everyone in the Tianling dynasty was happy and lively, but the people from the other families weren't in such a good mood. "Shangguanyu." A low and cold voice sounded. Chu Luiyue looked up slightly. It was Tan Taichen. His face was much more haggard and gloomy than before, and there seemed to be a coldness in his eyes that couldn't be erased. "Now you're very proud?" As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings suddenly quieted down. Everyone realized that something was wrong and looked over. His voice was filled with undisguised deep resentment. "You killed my beloved daughter and the rest of the people from the Taiyu dynasty. How should you apologize?" Digression. Previously, when the first book was about 700,000 words per exhaustion period, the second book was about 1,000,000 words. Now it was close to 2 million, and it was finally here. Every word was extremely difficult to write. "I hope to get through this period as soon as possible. Try to update at 6 o'clock in the afternoon." Chapter 1001. As soon as he said that, the place became even more silent. Many people had already noticed that something was amiss. After Jun Jiuqing ordered everyone to leave the ancient Phoenix Mountain, the people from the other empires came out one after another. However, the people from the Taiyu Empire did not appear until the barrier was closed. None of the 5 people were seen. At that time, everyone had already guessed that something might have happened to the people from the Taiyu Empire. At this moment, when they heard his question, they were certain that the 5 of them had indeed been completely annihilated. This time, the people who were qualified to enter the ancient Phoenix Mountain with Tan Taichen were the top geniuses of the Taiyu Empire. Losing one of them was already a pity. Moreover, there were 5 of them. Not to mention that one of them was Tan Taichen's beloved daughter, Tantai Ruoli. No wonder Tan Taichen's condition was very strange a few days ago. It turns out that something like this happened. It seems like he had already guessed this at that time, right? How terrifying. All 5 of them are dead. But there are so many people in the ancient Phoenix Mountain. How could he be so sure that it was Shangguanyu who did it? Since he's so sure, he must have evidence, right? Otherwise, why would he point it out so publicly? If it was really Shangguanyu who did it, then there's going to be a good show today. Some people discussed in low voices. They were shocked and doubtful, and each had their own opinions. Chu Luiyue was stunned and seemed to be surprised. "Senior Tantai, why do you say that?" When did I kill the people from the Taiyu Empire? Why don't I know about it? As she spoke, she looked around as if she was looking for the whereabouts of those people. Didn't everyone come out earlier? Why? Aren't they here? Don't put on an act. Tan Taichen was so angry that he laughed. You know very well whether it was you who did it or not. You forcefully tore open the barrier of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Not long after they entered, they all died. If it wasn't you, how could it be so coincidental? Oh, you're talking about this. Chu Liyue thought for a moment. Her lips slowly curled into an extremely cold smile as she spoke word by word. That's because after I arrived, I happened to see them chasing after the people from the Tianling dynasty. Tan Taichen's expression suddenly stiffened. I knew that they were in danger. I was worried, so I chose to forcefully break through the barrier. After rushing over, he saw Snapper and the other two being surrounded by Tantai Ruoli's group of 5. If I hadn't arrived in time, the 3 of them would have died there. I wonder how Hong Yu and the rest defended them to the point that they want to kill them all. Everyone had entered the ancient Phoenix Mountain with the intention of obtaining the 3 essences, as one overhead. It was truly strange for them to be so eager to kill others. Chu Liyue spoke slowly, but every word was like a nail that nailed Tantai Chun to the ground. He couldn't move. His gaze was evasive as he shouted angrily, "Who knows what's going on? Ruoli and the others have always treated people kindly. They would never do something like this. Even if they fought, it must be your people who did something wrong first. Otherwise, why would they kill the people from the Tianling dynasty?" Yes, Tianling has always followed the rules. Shang Guanyu and the others know that their strength can't be compared to the people from other dynasties, so they've always been cautious and honest. Thinking about it, it seems that I'm the only one who offended Taiyu before. Tan Taichen was a little embarrassed, so he interrupted Chu Liyue. This is just your side of the story. Ruoli and the others are dead now. Of course, you can say whatever you want. Even if I don't have enough evidence, since you admitted to fighting with them, you can't deny it. Unless you can prove your innocence, you'll still be blamed for this. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly and almost laughed out loud. Tan Taichen didn't have any evidence, but he directly accused her like this. Moreover, he wanted her to prove her innocence. Otherwise, he would put all the blame on her. What a bandit's logic. How could there be such logic in this world? Tantai Ruoli and the others left quickly after fighting with us. As for where they went after that, we don't know. After all, we're all busy improving our strength. We don't have the time to deal with people we don't like, said Chu Liyue lightly, and her voice was slightly cold. I've already given you the explanation you want. If you don't believe me, there's nothing we can do. But if you want to convict us without any evidence, then I'm sorry, but I won't play along. She didn't have the patience and interest to argue with them here. Tan Taichen was so angry that he couldn't say anything. He wanted to take out evidence, but he couldn't and didn't dare to. It wasn't easy for him to get that rune. It was divided into 5 parts and placed on each of the 5 people. Firstly, it was to allow them to find each other quickly after entering. Secondly, it was to ensure their safety. When they died in the end, the rune was obviously not complete. However, he could vaguely feel a scorching aura. It did seem like it was burned by some kind of flame. At first, he was just guessing. However, when he saw Shanghai Yu use the 2-colored flame, he was almost certain that it was her. Unfortunately, the time was too short, and he didn't get any more useful information. Most importantly, this bit of evidence could barely be considered as evidence, but he couldn't make it public. Otherwise, it would bring great trouble to himself and the entire Taiyu dynasty. Tan Taichen's heart felt like it was being pressed by a heavy stone, and he was extremely depressed. Chu Liyue carefully looked at Tan Taichen's face and took in his expression. It seemed that Tan Taichen had some concerns, and what he was worried about was obviously the rune in the Black Demon Cave. As long as he dared to mention it, she would dare to question him on the spot. But obviously, he didn't dare to. Even when his beloved daughter died, he was filled with resentment and hatred, but he still didn't dare to mention the Black Demon Cave. However, How could Tan Taichen really let it go? He looked around and said in a deep voice, "Good. Since you said that they left after fighting with you, then I'll ask, after the 6th day of the ancient Phoenix Mountain, who saw the people of Taiyu Dynasty?" Everyone looked at each other. After a short silence, a few people murmured in a low voice, "After the 6th day, I don't think I saw them." Yes. Later. I was quite curious that they didn't go to the main peak of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Now that I think about it, did something happen at that time? It's not impossible, Tan Taichen sneered. Shang Guanyu, did you hear that? The few of you are clearly the last few people to have seen them. If it wasn't you who did it, then who? You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.